My name is Katie, and I'm a nurse. My husband, Jack, is a full-time house husband now. He used to work for a company, but he quit because he didn't get along with his new boss. When Jack told me he quit, I was angry because he didn't talk to me about it first, but I tried to think positively and figured it was better that he quit before he got too stressed. Even though Jack isn't working now, I have a steady job as a nurse, and the house we live in was given to me by my mom, who passed away a few years ago, so we don't have to pay rent and are doing fine financially. At first, I was worried and stressed about Jack not working, but he was doing a good job with the housework, and I started getting used to the situation and even enjoying it. One day, I came home from work to find Jack's sister, Brittany, visiting. "Welcome home, hope you had a great day at work," Jack said. "Oh, I forgot to tell you Brittany was coming over, sorry about that." I was a bit annoyed, but seeing Jack so cheerful made me feel better. "It's okay, but next time, please let me know beforehand," I said. Jack promised to do that and told Brittany it was time for her to leave. Brittany didn't want to leave and said, "I'd like to stay the night. This house is so big and nice." Jack quickly said, "No, it's too sudden, Brittany, please go home today." Brittany left, looking angry, and I asked Jack, "Why did Brittany come over today? She lives so far away." Brittany had recently gotten a divorce and didn't have a place to stay, so she was living with our parents, but their apartment was small, and they were pressuring her to find a job and contribute money, so she wasn't feeling welcome. I felt bad for her. Jack explained, "I'm sorry, I didn't want to be alone. I let Brittany in because I needed someone to talk to." I was upset with Jack, but I understood he needed support. "Okay, but next time, call me first and make sure she leaves before I get home," I said. 2 days later, Jack texted me while I was at work, "Brittany wants to come over again. I'll make sure she leaves before 9 p.m., like you asked." I didn't want Brittany over again so soon, but Jack seemed happy, so I agreed, "Fine, but make sure she leaves on time." When I came home, Brittany was still there. "Why is she still here?" I asked. Jack immediately apologized. "I'm sorry, I got carried away talking to her. She'll leave now." Brittany packed up, looking annoyed, and left. I didn't like her attitude and said, "She's acting like this is her house, doesn't she have any manners?" Jack defended her, "She came all this way just to talk to me." I thought they could have met somewhere else, but I was too tired to argue. "Sorry, I'm just tired, I'm going to bed now." Jack seemed like he wanted to say more, but I was already heading to bed. The next day, I had the day off and was relaxing at home when Jack said, "I'm sorry about yesterday. After thinking it over, I realized I was wrong. I wanted you and Brittany to get along, but the timing was off." I realized I hadn't had much time to talk to Jack lately, and I understood how much he wanted us to get along. I said, "I see, I've been so busy, I haven't made time for us. I said too much yesterday, I'm sorry." Jack was happy we could talk it out. He smiled and said, "Okay, I'll make your favorite, meatball pasta, it's coming right up." He started cooking, but then his phone rang. "Who's calling?" I asked. Jack replied, "Oh, it's Brittany, I wonder what she wants." I had a bad feeling and didn't want him to pick it up, but I said, "Maybe it's something urgent." Jack picked up the phone, and although I couldn't hear what Brittany was saying, the call ended quickly. "So, what did Brittany want?" I asked. Jack said, "She wants to tell me something, so she's coming over." I didn't understand why I had to see her on my day off, and I felt annoyed, but since she was already on her way, I didn't say anything. Jack happily said, "I'll make pasta for Brittany too," and kept cooking. He didn't notice that I was upset, and I couldn't understand why he didn't tell her no, but I decided this might be my chance to talk to her myself. About 10 minutes later, the doorbell rang. Since Brittany lived far away, I didn't expect her to show up so soon, but when I opened the door, it was Brittany. She had big luggage with her, and I instantly felt uneasy, but I let her in. Jack was still cooking, so I asked Brittany, "What happened?" She looked like she had been crying and said, "I got kicked out of my parents' place. They said I can't stay with them because I'm not working. They're horrible, right?" My bad feeling was getting worse as I listened to her. Jack overheard and said, "That's awful. Family is supposed to help each other. They're terrible parents." I was really upset by what Jack said, but since it wasn't my place to say anything, I kept quiet and listened. Brittany said, "I have nowhere to go, so I need to stay here." I really didn't want Brittany to stay with us, and I was about to say something, but before I could, Jack said. Well, if that's the case, she'll have to stay here. We have a spare room, so she can stay with us from today. I gave Jack a glare, and he said, why are you looking at me like that? Brittany needs help. I couldn't take it anymore and said, what are you talking about? Don't make decisions without talking to me. You're not working, and Brittany isn't either, right? I can't support both of you on my own. Suddenly, something hit me on the head, and I didn't know what happened. Then I heard Brittany laughing and saying, Jack, don't throw an egg at her. When I touched my hair, I realized there were eggshells in it. Jack said, it's your fault, Mary, you need to be nicer to Brittany. Then he added, if you keep acting like this, we'll get divorced, and if we do, you'll have to leave the house, you know? Jack looked at me with a proud smile, and Brittany looked at me with a smug expression. They thought I was going to give in, so they asked, Mary, are you going to apologize? Go take a shower, and then we can eat the meatball pasta Jack made and talk about how we're all going to live together. Jack happily went back to finishing lunch, and Brittany sat on the couch, relaxing and watching TV. I had a lot to say, but for now, I just grabbed Brittany's luggage and threw it off the balcony. They were shocked by what I did and asked, what are you doing? Are you crazy? Jack panicked and told me to go get the luggage, but I said, why should I? This is my house. I won't let you do whatever you want anymore. Jack said, what are you talking about? This is our house, as husband and wife. This is my house too, and I'm letting my sister stay here. I just laughed and said, what's so funny? This house was given to me by my mom, so you have no right to it. Jack and Brittany were both surprised and said, wait, really? But even if that's true, since we're still married, it doesn't matter. They started mumbling, so I said, this house is mine. If you want to live with your sister so badly, then rent a house and live with her. And why should I support two people who don't work? I told Jack, you used to work hard before you quit, so I didn't say anything, but lately, you're not doing any housework either. Honestly, I'd rather live alone. Jack seemed shocked by what I said and replied, oh, so that's what you've been thinking? I said, I don't want a husband who doesn't take care of the family and can't even thank me for working and supporting us. Just then, Jack pulled out a divorce paper. I thought it was strange that he had it ready, and I realized that Brittany had probably planned this all along. I've already filled out my part, so all you have to do is fill in yours. I'll give you some time to think. When you're ready to apologize, just contact me. Okay, they replied, and left. I quickly took a shower, signed the divorce papers, and went to submit them. I figured my husband only showed me the divorce papers to scare me, even though it was Brittany's idea. Jack went through with it, and I didn't want a husband who would do that to me. A few days later, Jack called and asked, are you ready to apologize? I was so angry and didn't want to waste time on this. Shouldn't you be the one calling me first? I replied. Jack sounded like he was looking down on me, so I said, what do you mean? Why am I calling you? Why should I contact you? A stranger to me now? He didn't seem to understand the situation, so I decided to be clear. I've already submitted the divorce papers, and it's finalized, so now we're strangers. Oh, and I sold the house. Even if you want to come back, it doesn't matter. I also quit my job and am starting fresh somewhere else. And by the way, I sent all your stuff to your parents' house. It should be arriving soon. I'm not sure, though, because their place is so small. Will everything fit? Jack seemed confused and angry on the phone. I could hear him arguing with someone. Anyway, you were the one who wanted a divorce, right? I have nothing more to say to you. I'm blocking you now. Goodbye. Jack yelled something, but I hung up and blocked his number. A few months later, I visited the place where I used to live. On my way home, I stopped by a supermarket and saw someone who looked like Jack, working there. He seemed to have made a mistake at work, and a younger woman was telling him, how many times do I have to explain this to you? Don't make me repeat myself. Other workers were laughing at him, and I felt a little sorry for him, but I reminded myself that he was a stranger to me now. Maybe if Jack had thought more about how to handle his sister, things wouldn't have turned out this way. But now, I'm happy I divorced him. I'm enjoying my life on my own.
Hello everyone, I'm Brenda. My sister-in-law Kathleen has been a tremendous support in my life, and it was she who encouraged me to share my story with you today. Kathleen and I have always been close, especially since we worked together before I met my wonderful husband, Larry, through her. I'm deeply grateful to Kathleen for playing Cupid because Larry and I have built a beautiful life together. However, while Kathleen and Larry are incredible individuals, my relationship with Larry's mother, Grace, has been quite the opposite. From the moment we met, Grace made her disdain for me clear, creating a strain in our relationship that even Larry struggled to ease. Despite his efforts, Grace's hostility never faded. Things escalated at our wedding when Grace wrongly accused me of ruining her dress, an incident that caused friction between Larry and me. Grace, being a single mother, had always clung tightly to Larry, making it difficult for him to create distance from her negativity. The situation reached a breaking point on our first anniversary. Kathleen, ever the protective sister-in-law, discreetly warned me about Grace's plan to publicly humiliate me. She intended to accuse me of stealing a precious family heirloom, a necklace. Despite my attempts to resolve things, Grace was set on causing harm, adding another layer of tension to our already fragile relationship. As our anniversary approached, I felt torn. I wanted to celebrate peacefully, but Larry insisted on including his mother. Grace's potential interference loomed over the celebration, threatening to overshadow what should have been a joyful milestone. I longed for a day filled with love and laughter, but Grace's scheming weighed heavily on my heart. Although Kathleen had confided in me, I hesitated to tell Larry. I believed he needed to see his mother's actions for himself. On the day of the anniversary, I stayed vigilant, watching Grace closely. Thankfully, the day passed without major incidents, but Grace eventually cornered me when I was refilling my drink. She accused me of trying to take Larry away from her. Her words were bizarre and seemed completely unrelated to our celebration. She claimed I was the reason Larry was distancing himself from her, her tone dripping with ominous threats of what she had in store for me. Kathleen, sensing the brewing storm, remained by my side, ready for whatever Grace might do. Not long after, Grace excused herself, saying she was going to put on her jewelry. When she returned, she acted distressed, claiming her necklace and earrings were missing. Kathleen and I exchanged knowing glances, realizing Grace was trying to execute her plan to frame me. Despite her convincing performance, we stayed calm, watching as she attempted to turn the guests against me. Amidst the questioning, Grace paused dramatically, insinuating that I had stolen her jewelry. I was the thief. What are you talking about, Mom? Larry interjected, clearly perplexed. You probably just misplaced them. It's not like we have strangers here. How could they have been stolen? But Grace pressed on. No, Larry, this isn't a case of misplaced jewelry. No one broke in. It has to be your wife. She's always admired my jewelry a little too keenly. The room fell silent, shock visible on everyone's faces as Grace pointed accusingly at me. Larry looked embarrassed by his mother's outburst, but his faith in me did not waver. Mom, that's unfair, he countered firmly. You're casting baseless accusations at Brenda. She would never do something like that. You must have misplaced it. Grace persisted, trying to convince Larry of her suspicions, recalling every moment I had complimented her jewelry. But throughout the ordeal, Larry's trust in me remained strong, a testament to the bond we shared. I stood there, stunned by Grace's accusations, especially on a day meant to celebrate our anniversary. Grace, I would never take your jewelry. I defended myself, shocked she could think I'd steal from her. When I complimented your necklace, it was just that, a compliment. It doesn't mean I wanted it for myself. Grace snapped back sharply. Larry, you're blind with love. Can't you see how manipulative your wife is? She's so greedy that she didn't even ask. She just took my jewelry because she wanted it for herself. This sparked a heated argument between Larry and Grace, much to the dismay of our guests, who watched in disbelief as the drama unfolded. It was humiliating to be accused of theft during what should have been a joyful celebration. Staying composed, I turned to Grace and spoke firmly. You have no right to accuse me of something so outrageous in my own home. To claim I would stoop to theft is beyond insulting. I respect myself far too much to engage in what you're describing. Grace, undeterred, fired back. Don't play the innocent, Brenda. I saw you last night, sneaking into my room. You came out acting suspiciously. And now it all makes perfect sense, Grace insisted, utterly convinced of her own narrative. Grace, you're making wild accusations without a shred of evidence. I counter firmly. You have no proof, and it's wrong to tarnish my reputation based on nothing. Who knows what you've done with your jewelry? You can't just blame me. If you think I'm lying, then let's check your room. I'm certain we'll find my jewelry there, Grace proposed, her voice filled with conviction. We have witnesses here. Let's see for ourselves. Larry, it's inappropriate and disrespectful to invade our privacy based on mere suspicions, I protested. We can't allow your mother to keep pushing this. If we give in now, everyone will doubt my integrity forever. The tension was thick, and it was clear something needed to be done to resolve the situation without compromising our dignity. As difficult as it was, I knew we had to clear the air and prove my innocence without escalating the conflict. Larry stood in the middle, torn between his loyalty to his mother and his trust in me. He understood Grace's frustration but also knew how serious her accusations were. With no proof to back her claims, it was a dangerous line to cross. Realizing I needed to clear my name, Larry reluctantly agreed to his mother's demand. As the group, led by Grace, marched toward our bedroom, the tension only grew. Grace, certain of her accusations, made a beeline for my closet. She rummaged through it and then triumphantly held up her jewelry box. Look, Larry, I found my jewelry in your wife's closet. See? She did steal my things. She's greedy and jealous. No, this can't be, Larry said, clearly conflicted but still supportive. I know my wife. She wouldn't steal from you. I don't understand how your jewelry ended up there. Brenda, you didn't take this, right? Of course not, Larry. You know I'm not a thief, I replied, keeping my voice steady despite the chaos. Oh, really, Brenda? Grace sneered. Then explain how my other jewelry set ended up in your closet too. You can't wiggle your way out of this one. You should have just confessed and returned my things. Her anger was palpable as she leveled the accusation. I'm sorry, Larry, but this is too much. I need to call the police, Grace declared, pulling out her phone and beginning to dial. Her action sent waves of shock and whispers through the guests as the situation spiraled out of control. I remained composed, despite the crushing humiliation and the harsh whispers rippling through the room as we waited for the police. Grace continued her tirade, labeling me a gold digger and turning to Larry. This proves it, Larry. I told you Brenda was no good. You need to see the truth and divorce her. No one wants a thief in the family. The situation felt like a nightmare as I stood there, holding on to my dignity amid the false accusations. I knew this moment would test everything Larry and I had built together. As the reality of the police arriving loomed closer, Grace remained unwavering in her belief that I would soon be arrested. Larry, however, expressed doubt. Mom, I don't think calling the police was the right move. You might not like how this unfolds. What do you mean, Kathleen? Grace snapped, her confidence unshaken. I couldn't just stand by and let Brenda get away with this. People who commit crimes need to be held accountable without mercy, or they'll keep doing it. I think Kathleen is right, Mom, Larry interjected, trying to defuse the situation. Calling the police could backfire on you, but now that it's done, there's no turning back. How could this possibly turn out worse for me when Brenda is the one who committed the crime? Grace retorted, eager to see her version of justice unfold. At that moment, despite the gravity of the situation, I couldn't help but laugh. Kathleen smirked and shook her head, knowing something Grace didn't. The room grew tense as everyone stared at me, confused, wondering why I would be laughing while supposedly about to be arrested. Once I regained my composure, I turned to Grace. You know, Grace, it's fascinating how meticulously you plotted to frame me as a thief. What do you mean? You were the thief. You stole my jewelry. Grace shot back, her face flushed with indignation. Oh, come on, Mom. Have some decency, Larry said, his frustration evident. We all know Brenda didn't steal your jewelry. This has been a setup from the beginning. Kathleen's sudden declaration shocked everyone, including Grace, who for the first time appeared nervous. What are you talking about, Kathleen? I haven't done anything. If anyone's a thief, it's Brenda. Quit the act, Grace, Kathleen said firmly. You thought you could frame her, but I found out. I warned Brenda you try to pull something like this. Your scheme to trap her, it's over. I confronted her directly and the entire atmosphere shifted as the truth began to unravel. Grace's plot wasn't just an attack on me. It was an assault on the trust and harmony of our family. Even before the party began, I had sensed something was off, but her accusations during the heated exchange shocked everyone. How dare you suggest that? You're manipulating my child, making her say things without any proof, Grace fumed, her voice rising. Larry stood by me. Mom, We didn't have proof before, but now we do. The urgency to clear my name surged within me. Grace, flustered, demanded, "What are you talking about, Brenda? What proof could you possibly have?" Her panic became obvious as I calmly mentioned our home security system. "Did you forget our house is equipped with cameras?" I asked, watching as the color drained from her face. Grace's confidence began to crumble. Perhaps she assumed the cameras were only outside, unaware that her actions inside the house could also be recorded. Larry, catching on, added, "That's right, I almost forgot about the cameras too. We've got them in the hallways, clear views of every room from the outside. We can check the footage and see the truth." "Why do we need to check the cameras?" Grace's voice wavered, tinged with desperation. "I'm your mother, Larry. I'm telling you Brenda stole from me. We shouldn't need to prove anything else." "No, Mom," Larry responded firmly. "I thought you wanted to get to the bottom of this. I don't believe for a second that Brenda is a thief. If you're so sure, we should look at the footage together. I need to see for myself if what you're claiming is true. Otherwise, I can't believe it." Despite Grace's best efforts to stop us, I pulled at the footage on my phone. The room tense as everyone prepared to watch the events unfold, the truth about to be revealed. As the tension mounted, the police arrived. Briefed by the crowd, they quickly assessed the situation. Grace wasted no time approaching them, pointing directly at me. "Officers, you need to arrest my daughter-in-law, Brenda. She's a criminal. She stole my jewelry. We found it in her closet. Arrest her now." But I was ready. "I don't think so, Grace," I said, steeling myself for what was to come. I turned to the officers, interjecting firmly, "I have proof that my mother-in-law set me up and is making false claims against me." One officer asked, "Do you have solid evidence against her?" "Yes, I do," I replied confidently. "My home is equipped with security cameras, and here is the footage from yesterday." I handed my phone to the officers, and they began reviewing the video. Larry and the others watched closely as well. The footage clearly showed Grace taking her jewelry box from her room and entering mine while I was out. Moments later, she reappeared without the box, confirming she had deliberately planted it in my closet to frame me. The revelation stunned everyone, especially Larry, whose expression shifted to one of anger and disbelief. "Mom, how could you do this?" he demanded, his voice thick with frustration. "Brenda has been nothing but kind to you, and you stabbed her in the back like this. What is wrong with you?" Grace, now panicked and tearful under her son's piercing gaze, attempted to explain. "Larry, please let me explain." "No. Just no." Larry cut her off sharply. "I don't want to hear it, Mom. I'm done. I'm so done with how you tried to destroy my wife's life and reputation on our anniversary. I will never forgive you for that. I can't believe how low you stooped. I'm ashamed to have a mother like you, and I don't think I want any contact with you from now on." Larry's words hit Grace like a sledgehammer. Kathleen, who had warned about this possibility, nodded in agreement, her concerns now fully validated. The police, having reviewed the footage, realized the accusations against me were unfounded, confirming my innocence. One officer turned to me. "Ma'am, you have the right to file a formal complaint against your mother-in-law for making these false accusations." "Yes, I'm aware. Thank you," I replied, feeling the weight of the situation settle over me. "Would you like to proceed with pressing charges?" "It seems reasonable under the circumstances," the officer suggested. "We can take her into custody and clear this up." "Yes, I'd like to press charges," I confirmed. I glanced at Larry. "I'm sorry for the drama this has caused everyone tonight. Larry, are you okay with this?" "Brenda, what Mom did was wrong. You have my full support," Larry affirmed, his voice steady. As the officers approached Grace to place her in handcuffs, she resisted, her emotional state unraveling as she pleaded with Larry, Kathleen, and even me for forgiveness. "Brenda, please don't do this. I'm your mother-in-law. What will people think if they see me getting arrested?" Her desperate pleas fell on deaf ears. I remember how eager she had been earlier to see me in the same position. "You didn't care about public opinion when you called the police on me," I said, my voice calm and resolute. "Why should I care now? I'm justified in having you arrested after what you've done," I said firmly. The police warned Grace about resisting arrest, but her desperation had taken over. Her cries filled the room as the reality of her actions finally caught up to her. The family stood by, a mix of relief and sadness in their eyes, knowing this was a necessary step toward restoring peace and trust. "I'm sorry, Brenda. I shouldn't have done this. Look, we're family. We can solve this ourselves. There's no need to involve the police, Grace pleaded, her voice trembling with desperation. Her earlier words echoed in my mind, stark against her current plea for leniency. Grace, you once said that criminals shouldn't be spared because they might become worse. Now, seeing how you could easily become a menace to society, I feel it's my duty as a concerned citizen to ensure you face the consequences of your actions, I replied, mirroring her own logic back to her. Grace looked utterly shocked as I repeated her statement. She continued to sob and mumble apologies, but her words did little to sway anyone in the room. The guests murmured their disapproval, and the police efficiently moved to take her into custody. Larry and I accompanied the officers to the station to file a formal report, while Kathleen stayed behind to manage the aftermath of the evening's drama. As we reached the station, preparing to document everything officially, I paused, wanting to make sure Larry was still comfortable with the decision. Larry, are you sure you're okay with this? If you're uncomfortable with filing the report, we can reconsider, I offered, giving him a chance to back out. No, Brenda, we're not turning back on this. We need to file the report, Larry said firmly. I failed to protect you from my mother's actions. She was about to ruin your life, and I can't overlook that. You know I never doubted you for a second, right? I know, Larry. It's not your fault. Your mom's choices are her own, I reassured him, understating the emotional turmoil he was going through. Larry's love for his mother made the reality of her actions even more painful. Despite this, he stood by me, acknowledging that this step was necessary to protect our future and ensure that such behavior wouldn't happen again. As I finalized the report, Larry made a firm decision to keep Grace out of our lives permanently. To help heal the strain this had placed on our relationship, we had agreed to start couples counseling, strengthening our bond and learning to navigate our marriage dynamics with greater understanding. Despite the turmoil, Larry and I returned to our anniversary celebration. The food was ready, our friends and family were still gathered, and there was a renewed sense of support. We saw no reason to let one person's actions ruin our day. It was, after all, our anniversary, and we decided to continue the festivities, enjoying ourselves with those who truly cared. Even Kathleen had a wonderful time, sharing in the joy and laughter that filled the room. Meanwhile, Grace, my mother-in-law, faced the consequences of her actions in jail. Ultimately, she chose not to let the case go to trial and agreed to a settlement through my lawyer, which provided me with a substantial sum in compensation. Though she avoided a court case, I hope this experience would prompt her to reflect on her behavior. Since then, Larry, Kathleen, and I, along with several other family members, have cut ties with Grace completely. Some family members were hesitant to block her immediately, likely out of fear she could stir up more discord. However, distancing ourselves from her has brought peace. Larry and I have seen significant improvements in our marriage. The counseling has helped us rebuild with greater teamwork and understanding, and we are now looking forward to our next chapter together. We're expecting our first child. We've decided to keep our new family safe, ensuring Grace will have no involvement in our child's life. This decision has brought a new sense of stability and peace as we prepare for the future as a family. At my wedding, a situation unfolded that I could hardly believe. My in-laws, having indulged a bit too much, became the center of whispered gossip among the guests. In a surprising outburst, they confronted me, loudly proclaiming that now that I was married, if I truly wanted to belong to their family, I needed to prove my financial worth. They demanded an additional $5,000 a month, echoing sentiments my father-in-law had previously expressed. The room fell silent. I was left stunned by their audacity, feeling the color drain from my face. Thankfully, my father intervened, taking the microphone. With a firm but calm voice, he addressed them, emphasizing the embarrassment they were causing. His decisive words brought some relief to an otherwise tense moment. My name is Betty Ratchell, and I'm a 33-year-old woman engaged to Stephen, a 35-year-old man I met through a friend concerned about my prolonged single status. After losing my mother at a young age, my father took on the role of both parents, working tirelessly to provide for me. This loss deeply affected me, making me guard my emotions closely, and as a result, I rarely dated seriously. Despite my initial reservations about Stephen, his persistent care and respect gradually won me over. He was always a gentleman, and over time, his unwavering support allowed me to open my heart. Dating him brought happiness back into my life, making him incredibly special to me. As my relationship with Stephen deepened, I found myself imagining a future with him, and when he proposed, it felt like the natural next step for us. Stephen had always been incredibly understanding and kind. He would constantly reassure me, saying, "Don't worry, if you ever feel unsure about something, I'll be here for you until you feel better. I love you, Betty. You can always count on me." His words warmed my heart, and I knew I wanted to offer him the same depth of care and commitment. When I shared the news of our engagement with my father, his reaction was one of overwhelming joy. He even shed tears, exclaiming, "Wow, Betty, you're finally getting married. I'm so happy for you." I playfully called him dramatic, but it led to a touching conversation where he revealed his quiet fears that I might never settle down. That moment showed me just how deeply he cared. Thanking my dad felt especially meaningful, knowing how he had raised me on his own. I anticipated that the wedding would be an emotional day for both of us, probably with more tears from him, given how emotional he was now. With our engagement set, Stephen and I began the hectic journey of wedding planning. Balancing our demanding jobs with wedding preparations meant our weekends were packed, leaving little time to rest. But we managed to keep our spirits high, excited for the special day ahead. One of the most anticipated moments was finally meeting Stephen's parents. Although Stephen had already met my father shortly after the proposal, scheduling conflicts had delayed my introduction to his parents. Finally, a visit was arranged, and as we approached their house, I was filled with both excitement and nervousness, eager to see how this meeting would go. I felt a surge of nervousness, but Stephen was quick to comfort me. "Don't worry, my parents are very kind," he assured, helping ease my anxiety as we stepped into what would be a significant new chapter in our lives. When I rang the doorbell at Stephen's family home, his mother greeted us. "Mom, I'm home," Stephen announced cheerfully. She responded with a warm smile, "Welcome home, Stephen. It's so good of you to come." As she engaged in light conversation with her son, I introduced myself politely. "Nice to meet you. My name is Betty, and I'm Stephen's fiancée." Her demeanor shifted subtly as she turned to me, her voice dropping from the cheerful tone she used with Stephen, her smile fading. "So, you're Betty," she said, giving me a long, scrutinizing look that felt more like judgment than a greeting. She led us into the living room, and her cool attitude persisted. "Betty, I'm curious. What do you bring to the table? Stephen is our treasure, our only child. If you're going to marry him, you need to be a suitable wife. Are you worthy of him?" she asked sharply, her tone more like an interrogation than a question. I was taken aback by her sudden harshness and struggled to find words. "You're joining our family, you know. Are you ready for that?" she continued, her words carrying an almost ceremonial weight, as if marrying into her family required some monumental commitment. I wasn't marrying into royalty, so why such heavy expectations? As I pondered how to respond, her patience wore thin. "When I ask you a question, you answer right away. You're so rude," she snapped, her voice rising. Despite feeling overwhelmed, I managed to respond. "I hope that Stephen and I will support each other throughout our marriage." This answer didn't satisfy her, she retorted. "What a naive thing to say. You're not just going to support each other. It's your job as his wife to support him. You don't even understand the basics," she criticized harshly. At this point, Stephen's father, who had been quietly observing, stepped in. "Honey, calm down," he interjected gently, turning to me with an apologetic smile. "Sorry about that, Betty. You must have been startled by my wife's words." His calm demeanor attempted to diffuse the tension. As I tried to remain composed, I reminded myself that Stephen's mother was fiercely protective of her only son. Perhaps her sharpness came from nerves. Just then, Stephen's brother entered the room, his quiet, gentle presence momentarily soothing the atmosphere. But that peace quickly evaporated when he, with a disarming smile, voiced his support for their mother's harsh words. "What my mother says is justified," he said. "What concerns me most is that you come from a single-parent family." Confused, I asked, "What do you mean by that?" "Being raised by just one parent doesn't have a good public image. We can't be too happy about someone like that becoming the wife of our only son, can we?" he explained calmly. "Hold on a minute," I began, as shock and anger flared inside me. I couldn't let his comment pass unchallenged. What's wrong with being raised by a single parent? My father worked incredibly hard to raise me on his own, and I'm proud of him and my upbringing. Being raised by one parent doesn't make me any less capable or valuable, I said, my voice firm. But they continued to argue. Since you were missing one parent, you couldn't have learned how to be a good wife, how to do housework and such, they claimed. I responded, refusing to let their assumptions diminish me. I did plenty of housework to help my father, and I can cook pretty well too. So please don't say that. Despite my rebuttal, Stephen's mother dismissed my words entirely. I will allow you to marry Stephen, she said, but in exchange, you must promise to devote everything to us because we are Stephen's parents. Can you promise that? I was taken aback. What? I stammered, unsure how to respond to such a demand. Since you came here to ask for our permission to marry our son, you do understand your duties, don't you? She continued, leaving no room for negotiation. Before I could gather my thoughts to articulate a response, the conversation continued, and it became clear that my in-laws were intent on dominating the discussion. I barely had space to express my views. That night, as I reflected on what had happened, I felt overwhelmed by the encounter and deeply unsettled by the dynamics I was about to enter. The evening had been a wake-up call, and I realized I needed to talk to Stephen about how his parents treated me. Stephen, do your parents always talk to people like that? I asked gently, hoping for some understanding or support. He seemed unaffected by my question. What about it? He replied, clearly not seeing the issue. I tried again, carefully explaining my concerns. Well, the way your parents spoke to me, and what they said, doesn't that seem unfair? Stephen shrugged it off. Oh really? They were just making sure you're ready for the marriage. I understood that his parents were concerned for their son's future, but their approach had felt excessive. It was troubling that Stephen didn't seem to see it the same way. I get that your parents are worried, but it felt like too much, I pointed out carefully. Really? Why is that? Stephen asked, his tone neutral. They didn't say anything wrong. Besides, they gave us their blessing to get married, so don't worry about it. His response troubled me. It seemed he was more in line with his parents' views than with understanding my feelings. Sensing my unease, Stephen wrapped his arms around me in a reassuring hug. Betty, you don't have to worry so much, he said softly. My parents are just a little upset because their only son is getting married. Though his words were meant to comfort, they only confirmed that he didn't fully grasp my concerns. It's all going to be fine. Don't overthink it. I'm sure they just want what's best for us. They want us to be as good of a couple as they are. That's why they were a bit harsh, he added. Oh, I replied, still feeling unsettled. Stephen seemed to think his parents' high expectations were normal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't right for them to judge me simply because I was raised by a single parent. I didn't believe that people who expressed such views were truly supportive partners. We are the ones getting married, I thought, and our focus should be on our love, not their approval or disapproval. Although I was upset, I decided not to dwell too much on his parents' opinions. The wedding day soon arrived, and the venue was filled with our relatives, friends, colleagues, and even bosses. As I walked down the aisle, my father beside me, the man who had lovingly raised me on his own, I felt a whirlwind of emotions. Stephen and I exchanged our vows and rings, and the room erupted in applause. Despite the challenges, this was our moment, and I was determined to savor it. As Stephen and I walked back down the aisle together, the reality of our marriage sank in, filling me with a joy I had never experienced before. At the reception, the hall was bustling with excitement. Videos of our journey together played in the background, adding a personal touch to the celebration. It was a joyful time, reconnecting with friends I hadn't seen in a while and receiving heartfelt congratulations from so many people. Despite my initial reservations about Stephen's parents, the day had turned out to be one I would always cherish. I felt relieved and genuinely happy that I had chosen to marry Stephen. We planned to officially register our marriage after the ceremony, a step that would make our union legally complete. As the day unfolded, I savored every moment, basking in the joy and celebration. But when it came time for the formalities, greeting our guests and acknowledging everyone's support, a sense of unease began creeping in. Stephen's parents, standing beside us, were visibly unsteady, their faces flushed a deep red. It was clear they had indulged too much in the festivities, and some of our relatives quietly asked if they were all right. Though embarrassed, we pressed on, trying to maintain decorum. When it was time for us to address the guests, the situation took an unexpected turn. Without warning, Stephen's mother grabbed my hand, pulling me away from him with surprising force. Her voice boomed as if she were in a wrestling ring, not a wedding hall. "Listen to me, Betty. After this wedding, you're going to devote yourself to us completely. Prepare yourself. We're going to test you hard." The guests murmured, some laughing awkwardly as if it were a joke, but the tension was undeniable. Before I could react, Stephen's father seized the microphone and pointed at me. "Betty, don't you feel embarrassed wearing a dress like that? It doesn't suit you at all," he sneered. His mother nodded in agreement, piling on the criticism. The murmurs among the guests grew louder, turning from amusement to concern. I turned to Stephen, my eyes pleading for him to step in and stop his parents' humiliating outbursts. This was supposed to be our wedding day, a celebration of love, not a spectacle of disrespect. But Stephen stood frozen, making no move to defend me or our union. The situation escalated when his parents, still intoxicated, began making outrageous demands. "After you register the marriage, you should give us a few $1,000s a month, plus your entire bonus." They insisted, their greed blatant and shocking. I felt my face drain of color as I stood there, utterly stunned. My father, who had been watching the scene unfold, couldn't stay silent any longer. He stepped forward, taking the microphone from Stephen's father with a steady hand. "Enough of this," my father said calmly but firmly. "Don't you realize you're making fools of yourselves?" Stephen's parents, instead of backing down, lashed out, mocking my father for being a single parent. Single parents are never any good, they jeered, their words cutting deeply. But my father didn't falter. His expression remained composed as he replied, "You people are worse than I imagined. You even refuse to meet me because I'm a single father." Then, with a twist that took everyone by surprise, my father revealed something that changed the tone of the room entirely. "I never imagined that someone like you would work for President Roy," my father said, his voice calm yet pointed. "President Roy is a respectable man, and I always assumed his employees would be just as decent." The mention of President Roy, a business partner of my father's and an old friend, visibly shook my father-in-law. His confident demeanor began to crack. My father continued, "And speaking of single parents, President Roy was raised by his mother alone." He let the weight of his words settle before delivering the final blow. "So, you just insulted the president of the company you work for." The realization hit hard. Stephen's parents' faces fell as they grasped the gravity of their mistake. The room shifted, the power dynamic completely reversed. My father-in-law, once bold and arrogant, now appeared small and desperate. "I apologize, sir," he stammered, his bravado gone. "Please, don't tell the president about this." He fell to his knees, pleading, an image that was starkly different from the domineering figure he had been moments ago. For me, this moment was pivotal. It revealed both the true nature of Stephen's family and the strength and connections of my own. But perhaps most telling was Stephen's silence. He stood there, unmoving, unwilling, or unable to protect me from his parents' outbursts. The painful realization struck me, Stephen might never stand up for me. As the tension in the hall reached its peak, guests, caught between shock and amusement, began recording the scene. My father, resolute and unshaken, turned to me. "No matter how much they apologize," he said firmly, "they can't take back their words." He looked me in the eye and asked, "Do you want to leave with me?" Without hesitation, I nodded. I took the microphone from Stephen's limp hand and with a steady voice, addressed everyone in the room. "Thank you for the great entertainment, but there will be no marriage." I paused, making sure everyone, especially Stephen and his parents, understood. "I'll return all the gifts and contributions you've made for this occasion." With that, I left the reception hall, my father by my side. As we exited, I caught a final glimpse of Stephen and his parents, shocked, dismayed, and surrounded by concerned relatives. Behind us, the room descended into chaos. Over the following days, I stayed true to my word. I returned the money and gifts, and to my surprise, many of the guests expressed their admiration for my decision. They commended both my father and me for our integrity and courage in such a difficult situation. The fallout from the wedding was swift and severe for Stephen. His co-workers, many of whom had witnessed the debacle, spread word of the incident. It not only tarnished his reputation but also highlighted his inability to stand up to his unreasonable parents. Embarrassed and unable to face his colleagues, Stephen resigned from his job. The repercussions extended to his father as well. Word of the incident reached President Roy, and he took swift action. Stephen's father was demoted and reassigned to a remote division of the company, a clear message about the company's stance on integrity and respect. Stephen's family found themselves increasingly isolated within their community, shunned by both neighbors and extended family. Their actions at the wedding had led to a social and professional downfall, a stark reminder that actions have consequences, and sometimes those consequences are unavoidable. In the midst of this chaos, my life began to take a new direction. The bond with my father deepened, and we spent more quality time together. One day, he broached a topic that caught me off guard. "Betty, are you interested in running the business?" he asked, his eyes filled with hope and sincerity. I hesitated, unsure. "Do you mean? Why don't you work towards becoming the president of my company?" he suggested, confident in my abilities. The idea was daunting, but his belief in me sparked a sense of purpose. "I'll do my best, I promise," excitement and nervousness swirling inside me. From that moment on, I shifted my focus entirely to my career. Romantic entanglements could wait. I was determined to prove not just to my father, but to myself, that I could excel. I dove into learning every aspect of the business, determined to lead with the same strength and integrity my father had always shown. Looking back on the wedding fiasco, it was clear that Stephen's family had been unreasonable, turning what should have been a joyous occasion into a spectacle. Thankfully, since the marriage was never officially registered, I avoided a legally binding mistake. Now free from the burdens of marital drama and in-law complications, I could fully commit to my career. It was liberating to realize that out of chaos had come clarity, a new direction for my future. I'm eager to see where this path leads, and I wish myself all the best as I embrace this new chapter. If you've stayed with me until the end, thank you for being part of this journey. I hope you found something valuable in this story. Stay tuned for more updates, and if you enjoyed this, please consider subscribing for the next chapter of my life. My husband yelled at me on the phone, saying he wants a divorce. I thought as I came back from my work trip. He's fed up with me, but I've had enough too. If I say sorry, maybe he'll change his mind. I understand, I said to him on the phone. But instead of going to my husband's parents' house where he was, I went somewhere else. My name is Sophie, and I'm 28 years old. I got married to David, who is 2 years older than me, 3 years ago. To be frank, David is the son of the future CEO of the company where I work. Originally, I worked somewhere else, but after marrying David, I changed jobs. Now, I'm working hard in the same company as him, aiming to become the CEO's wife someday. David wasn't sure about me working there, but when the current CEO, who is his dad, ordered it, there wasn't much to discuss. My job keeps me really busy, and I often have to go on long business trips. We've been wanting to have a baby, but with our hectic schedules, it's been hard to relax enough for that. Lately, things between David and me haven't been great. We're both really busy, and we end up arguing about small stuff a lot. Just the other day, David got mad at me as I was getting ready to leave for work. "Hey Sophie, why didn't you wake me up when I asked you to?" "I did wake you up a few times, David, but you yelled at me to leave you alone and said you'd wake up by yourself, so I went ahead and made breakfast." "What? I never said anything like that. Don't lie to me." "I'm not lying. I tried to wake you up at least 20 times, and your alarm was blaring the whole time. You can't imagine what's going to happen if I'm late today. I'll get chewed out by my dad again. Why do I have to be the one who gets yelled at when it's his fault for not waking up?" At first, I put up with my husband's unfair scolding, but eventually, I started standing up for myself. This led to a big fight recently where he said, "I want a divorce." Thankfully, our in-laws stepped in and stopped things from getting worse. Still, I was getting really tired of him bringing up divorce every time we argued. One day, while I was getting ready for a business trip, my husband came up to me looking upset. "Hey Sophie, you're leaving for another trip, huh?" My husband always calls my business trips like they're not important. It's not just a trip, it's a business trip. Why do I have to keep explaining this to you? I replied, feeling frustrated. Must be nice always going on trips and neglecting the housework. You're probably just going sightseeing after pushing all the house chores on me, right? Listen, that's enough. This is for your company, you know. Why can't you just accept that it's a business trip? I can't imagine how it's like to be a rookie like you going on a business trip. Being so useful is pretty much just like a trip. What the hell is wrong with you? Can't you tell the difference between a trip and a business trip? Well, it's the truth, isn't it? You say I'm dumping the house chores on you, but you've never done anything around the house when I'm away on a business trip. When I'm not around, my husband only ever orders takeout, leaves the laundry piled up, and doesn't even take out the garbage. Despite doing nothing, his attitude gives me so much stress. Even the divorce drama last time was all because of his personality. Even though we both work and spend the same amount of time on our jobs, all the housework is left to me. On top of that, he acts all superior and domineering, which I couldn't stand. Trying to discuss it with him is pointless as he never admits to any fault on his part. Instead, he always turns it around and blames me. As I continued getting ready for my business trip in silence, my husband started yelling at me again. For goodness sake, the wife of the future CEO shouldn't be taking business trips so lightly. If you're not assertive like me, the other employees will walk all over you. That's exactly why I'm working hard. I need to learn the job and meet with different clients. And yes, being the CEO's son helps. But we also have to acknowledge the efforts of all the employees who work hard to keep the company running smoothly. What are you talking about? The company's success is because of the hard work of all the employees, not just because you're the CEO's son. You should work as hard as everyone else. At those words, my husband got really angry and shouted, "What do you mean, work harder?" The other day, I overheard some employees talking. They said you always pass off overtime and difficult tasks to others and complain a lot. What? Who said that? I'll fire them immediately. That's not the point. Can't you see that you're the one in the wrong here? Can't you see that you're just riding on your father's reputation? My husband's eyes widened with anger, and he grabbed my bangs roughly. Don't get too ahead of yourself. Who do you think got you this job in the first place? Ouch, let go. You're only able to work at this prestigious company because you're married to me, got it? Refuse the business trip. I won't allow you to neglect our home for some work trip. I've explained it many times, it's for my job. I can't just refuse. Shut up. Stop arguing back. You married me, so you should just listen quietly to what I say. Suddenly, his grip on my hair loosened, and I stumbled back onto the floor. If this argument keeps going, it might end up in another threat of divorce. I managed to push my husband out of the room and focus on getting ready for my business trip. When I come back, I'll have to deal with a week's worth of chores piled up by my husband. I bet the laundry will still be there, and the trash will be overflowing. Just thinking about it made me feel exhausted even before the trip. The next day, as planned, I headed off on my business trip. I focused on my work and didn't let personal issues get in the way. When I got back home after a week, I couldn't believe what I saw. I'm back. The house was sparkling clean, just like the day I left for my business trip. It was a pleasant surprise. Thank goodness. Maybe David finally understood how I felt. Perhaps he had a change of heart and decided to help with the housework. Just as I started feeling relieved that my husband was being more supportive, I saw divorce papers on the table. What? What's this? There was a note next to them saying, "I'm going back to my parents' place. We're getting a divorce." Panicked, I quickly called my husband, and he picked up right away. Huh? Did you even read the divorce papers? His casual tone angered me, and I snapped back. Wait, are you seriously talking about divorcing me? Of course. You'd be in trouble if I did, wouldn't you? Don't talk about divorce so casually. Then my husband, sounding smug, said, "If you're going to take it that seriously," and started laying out conditions. "If you start taking care of the house and listen to me, I might think about canceling the divorce. But of course, no more trips." What? Like you, it wasn't just a trip. Huh? Are you talking back? If you are, then I'm divorcing you. You're such a nag. A nag? He calls me a nag when he can't even do a single thing around the house himself. If he's up for it, so am I. Fine. If you don't want to get divorced, then come and apologize. Do you understand? Holding back my urge to argue, I replied calmly, "Okay, I understand. You should have listened to me from the beginning. Now come quickly." With that, he hung up. Instead of going to my in-laws' house where he was, I headed to City Hall. I submitted the divorce papers and they were accepted without any trouble. I was officially single again. 3 hours later, while I was packing up at home, My ex-husband came back with his mother, probably fed up with waiting for me. As soon as they saw me, they started hurling insults. Hey, how long are you gonna keep me waiting? That's right, you're a failure as a wife, yet you're out having fun. You should be taking care of David. Taking care of? How old is David? He's older than me, isn't he? I fired back, feeling frustrated. As I retorted, their brows furrowed in anger. Shut up, stop being stubborn, and apologize quickly. We're really going through with the divorce. If anyone will be in trouble if we get divorced, it's you, Sophie. You could have been the wife of the next company president, and you're okay with acting this way? And you. If you divorce me, you won't be able to live in this luxurious lifestyle. Are you okay with that? Well, I never thought you were a good match for David in the first place, so I really don't care. At a loss for words, my ex-husband grinned devilishly. Fine, this is your last chance. If you don't apologize now, we're getting a divorce. I'll even kick you out of the company. Decide quickly. At that moment, anger surged through me like a fireball. I had to make him understand the reality of the situation. We're already divorced, you know. What? Just as you wished. I've already submitted the divorce papers and they've been accepted, so I'm no longer your wife. What? Her ex-husband and mother-in-law stood there in shock. After a moment of silence, he finally spoke up. What are you talking about? This must be a joke, right? You wouldn't? Why would I lie? If you don't believe me, you can check the records yourself. No way. Suddenly, the mother-in-law, who had been listening, started to shout. Wait, Sophie, what have you done? You've put divorce on David's record, our future CEO. It was your son who gave me the divorce papers first. All I did was submit them. Stop making excuses. Cancel the divorce right now. Do you understand? I'm sorry, but once the divorce papers have been accepted, they can't be canceled. And I have no intention of canceling anyway. What? The mother-in-law was speechless, and the ex-husband just hung his head in defeat. Ignoring them, I continued, I'm tired of being ridiculed every time I go on a business trip and having to juggle work and housework every day. As far as I'm concerned, you're nothing but a burden. So Sylvie, calm down. Calm down. I'm perfectly calm. What's the point of being married if it's just a title? All you care about is yourself, isn't it? I didn't mean it like that. Do you realize you're losing your status as the CEO's wife? Are you okay with that? I didn't join your company to become the CEO's wife. I don't know how much you've been spoiled, but I didn't marry you to take care of you. Are you really willing to give up this lifestyle? If you just wait a little longer, you could become the CEO's wife. I absolutely refuse to keep being your caretaker. I'm not your mother. Just go and live your life on your own. With an intensity like never before, my husband was completely teary-eyed. His mother-in-law took her turn, stuttering out her final provocation. What if you divorce David? You'll also lose your job. And what if I do? What? I've already informed your father that I'll be quitting the company. What? The mother-in-law and ex-husband's eyes widened in surprise. To confirm, my ex-husband started calling his father. After a few rings, his father answered, and he put the call on speaker. Dad, listen to this. Sophie decided to divorce me on her own. Yeah, I heard. She told me she's quitting the company too. She's so selfish. Can't you fire her immediately with your CEO powers? Well, I guess I should fire someone ASAP. You. Yeah, that's right. Wait, what? Instead of the stunned ex-husband, his mother-in-law turned to her husband. What do you mean by that? There's nothing to explain. David is a liability who doesn't contribute anything to the company. I'm disappointed in his work ethic. Wait, what? How can you suddenly say that about our son? Stay quiet, the father-in-law firmly told his wife. David, your performance at work is lacking. You misuse company resources, make inappropriate advances towards female colleagues, and complain about trivial things like the cafeteria. You're just not cutting it. Do you think I don't know that your subordinates consider you incompetent? No, that's not true. It can't be. I can't protect you any longer, even if you're my son. You understand this, right? Just because you're the boss's son doesn't mean you get special treatment. But that doesn't mean you have to fire me. The only thing I can commend you for is marrying a capable wife. Sophie will continue to work for the company, but you're fired, David. At his father's words, my ex-husband's eyes widened in shock. Unfazed by his reaction, the father-in-law continued, "Unlike you, Sophie is diligent in her work and brings in a lot of contracts. She's highly respected by our clients. Many companies have chosen to work with us because of her. But she was only sent on business trips because she's new. Don't be ridiculous. We trusted Sophie, so we gave her more responsibilities. You made fun of her, calling it a vacation or something, didn't you?" No, I didn't. Let me make it clear. There's no place for you here until you become independent. Never come back to this house, understood? No way. And so, my ex-husband was disowned by his father-in-law, lost his job, and couldn't even return to his parents' home. When his mother tried to defend him, his father blamed her for spoiling him and gave her a divorce notice too. They used up their savings to live in an apartment, but they struggled to find work, and their unemployment continued. I still received messages from my ex-husband. "Sophie, I was wrong. I won't make fun of you anymore. I promise to take care of myself, so please come back. I can't take it anymore. Help me." He was so persistent that I finally blocked his number. I shouldn't have to deal with that mama's boy anymore. On the other hand, I'm still working hard under my father-in-law, who is now the CEO. I have my own team, and I'm enjoying fulfilling days. I'm grateful that my father-in-law is a supportive manager. From now on, I want to pursue my goals without being held back by meaningless family ties.
After the somber funeral for my father, a prominent shareholder, my brother-in-law caught us off guard by raising the delicate topic of inheritance. The focus shifted to stocks and a substantial $5 million bequest, confidently asserting that my wife, the eldest daughter, and my sister was set to inherit this windfall. The revelation initially filled her with joy at the prospect of a significant inheritance. However, their excitement was short-lived when the family lawyer delivered the disheartening news that my brother-in-law had no legitimate claim to the inheritance. I, Greg Johnson, a 42-year-old office worker, reflected on my father's vibrant life, despite his age of 78. He remained full of vitality, actively engaged in his work. My older sister, a perpetual source of trouble, led a carefree life, causing continuous worry for our parents. In her middle age, she introduced Aaron Corner, a man she intended to marry. Despite his youth and handsomeness, I couldn't warm up to him due to his demeanor. My sister demanded that our father finance her wedding, swiftly depleting the funds and unapologetically seeking more. A year after her marriage, tragedy struck. Our father collapsed while playing golf and passed away a few days later. Overwhelmed by grief, I found myself struggling with the funeral preparations, with no assistance from my sister. After the funeral, a lawyer visited our home to discuss the inheritance outlined in my father's will. While my mother and I were already aware of its contents, my sister and brother-in-law were oblivious until then. They shockingly claimed that the stocks and the $5 million inheritance should go to my wife. Stunned and speechless, my mother and I were taken aback. The lawyer corrected them, revealing that my brother-in-law had no right to inherit. Surprised and disappointed, my sister and her husband expressed disbelief and shock. The lawyer dropped another bombshell. My sister and I did not share the same father. This revelation left my sister furious, demanding an explanation from our mother, who wore an indescribable expression. The long-held family secret had finally come to light, leaving my sister shaken and seeking answers. "I'm sorry," our mother managed to say amidst the shaking emotions. "You are the child of my previous husband." Since childhood, my sister had teased me, claiming that Dad loved her more. Now faced with the truth, she seemed unable to accept it. However, she quickly shifted her stance, suggesting that if she was adopted, she would still have inheritance rights. Aaron chimed in, agreeing with her, yet our mother firmly denied any adoption, causing disbelief. "I'm the eldest daughter, and even Dad said so," my sister angrily declared, glaring at me in response. I felt my anger intensifying as I countered my sister's insatiable desire for more, despite the considerable amount of money our dad had already given her. My brother-in-law chimed in, supporting her claim and stating that it's natural to spend money on one's daughter. However, the lawyer intervened, drawing attention to the questionable spending, including debt repayment, and suggested reviewing the will. My sister panicked, claiming ignorance about any will. It turned out that our father had wanted to discuss and decide the contents with the family, but she had skipped it for frivolous reasons. When the lawyer proposed reviewing the will, my sister and her husband reluctantly agreed. The will clearly stated the transfer of property to my mother and me, explaining why my sister was not adopted. Her mistreatment of me and reckless spending had disappointed our father, realizing she had no right to the inheritance. My sister was visibly shocked, and her brother-in-law, who had initially supported her, suddenly changed his tune, accusing her of lying and abruptly leaving the room. In her anger, my sister blamed our mother for not asking to have her adopted, claiming it was unfair that only Mom received the inheritance. Frustrated, she cried and screamed, expressing her disappointment. Despite my sister's outrageous behavior, the lawyer remained calm, explaining that as the biological son, I had the right to receive it all. Before things escalated further, he warned that the police might need to be involved if the situation continued. My sister appeared startled by the mention of the police, given her history of repeated theft. As my mother spoke tearfully to her, she clicked her tongue and left the room. Half a year passed, and the inheritance proceedings were completed without issue. Despite some grumbling from my sister and brother-in-law, they couldn't stand against the lawyer's efficiency. My mother gave my sister a small amount of money, but I had no intention of interfering. The frustrating part for our family was that the two had disappeared. Their blatant greed was so evident that even our relatives were lost for words. One day, my wife suggested that my mother, daughter, and I go out to eat. Since my father's passing, our mother had been down, but she showed smiles when with her granddaughter. I suggested to my mother, "Why don't you live with us?" But you know, Rook still comes home occasionally. Sis only comes around to beg for money, doesn't she? How long does she plan to keep this up? The reason my mom defends my sister is that she is her blood-related child, and there might be concern that if we visit our family home, my sister might cause trouble again. Understanding that, I told her to take her time thinking about it and then drove my mom to our family home. Upon arrival, we encountered something unexpected. The lights were on in our supposedly empty home. It wasn't the time for the helper to come, so we were puzzled. I parked the car, suggesting, "Let's go up and have some coffee with Mother." We got out of the car and headed to the entrance, but the moment we approached the door, a car came rushing in. "Mom, watch out." Hearing my daughter ahead of me, I shielded my wife with my body. The car just grazed me, and I managed to dodge it, but I collided with a nearby flower bed, injuring myself badly. The car stopped after hitting the garage door. "Are you okay, Dad?" My wife and daughter rushed over, supporting me. Mother was trembling in shock at the sudden event. Understandably, from that moment on, a day of turmoil began. I was taken to the hospital by ambulance and had to be hospitalized briefly. Later, I heard that Aaron Warner, my brother-in-law, was driving the car. According to the police, he explained that he mistook the accelerator for the brake. However, I had my doubts about that story. Amidst all of this, my sister and mother visited me in the hospital. Mother left briefly to arrange flowers, and during that time, my sister coldly looked at me and said, "You're only tough and bodied, huh?" With a slightly disappointed tone, I couldn't help but give her a smile. If I had died in the accident, Mom would inherit everything, right? "Messed up your plan," I said a bit sarcastically, and my sister looked uneasy. "You planned this, didn't you?" When I asked, my sister looked away, and I added, "But I won't be accepting Mom's share, so it won't work out for you." My sister looked surprised at this. She probably thought I would naturally accept it. I have a wife and kids, so I passed the inheritance to them. It's not strange for the head of the family to think that way. Even so, I've made a will early, like Dad did. My sister was taken aback at this. What? So that means? Yeah, unfortunately, my share of the inheritance won't go to Mom. My sister stared at me, then began to shake with anger. There's $5 million, right? You could at least share a bit. When I immediately refused, my sister furiously grabbed my collar. I'm your sister. We should split it. Whether it was the amount of the inheritance that drove her mad, she continued to scream in a very aggressive voice. I felt pity for my sister. It's that greedy attitude that disappointed Dad. Don't you get it? My sister's face turned even redder, and she grabbed my neck. Bro, stop it. Mother, who had just returned, scolded her loudly. Then the nurses, called by the nurses' call button, arrived and escorted my sister out of the room. Mother seemed to want to protect my sister, but my sister had lashed out at her too. As she left, she asked, "Why did she turn out like this?" Hearing Mother say this sadly, I felt a pain in my heart. Later, Mother's health deteriorated, and she fell off, gradually weakening. My wife and I started visiting the family home more frequently to support her, but this seemed to upset my sister. Probably she encountered my wife when coming to ask for money or heard about it from Mother. One day, my sister called my cell phone. From now on, we will take care of Mom. You guys don't need to come. Watch this. All of a sudden, however, my sister wasn't listening and said, "We've already decided," before hanging up. My wife told me she had been turned away by my sister. Too concerned about how my sister, who had no experience in household chores or living, would manage, I quickly contacted Mother. To my surprise, I found out that my brother-in-law had experience in caregiving. Mother was still independent, not yet in a worrying state. This reassured me. However, within just a month, Mother was rushed to the hospital in an ambulance. It was said to be due to a medication dosage error. When we rushed to the hospital, Mother was shockingly weak. The doctors also seemed puzzled by her condition. I couldn't recall such a mistake ever happening before. Leaving my wife to care for Mother, I went to our family home, which was in a terrible state. Despite my mother's love for cooking, the usually well-stocked fridge was shockingly empty. Even the helper had been swiftly dismissed. Feeling ashamed of trusting my sister even a little, anger surged within me. Checking the safe where valuables were kept, I discovered a large amount of money missing from Mother's passbook. The passbook with the inheritance was secure in a bank locker, but there was hardly any money left for living expenses. Returning to my mother, I explained the situation and revealed my sister's betrayal. Brooke did such a thing. Mother seemed unaware of the passbook issue and showed a shocked expression. When asked about the medication error, she explained that my brother-in-law had prepared it and looked troubled. "Mom, I don't think you should let them into that house. They claimed they would take care of you, but the state of that house was the worst. And you've gotten so frail. Haven't they been feeding you properly?" Speaking with concern, I hung her head. "Mom, let's live together. I'll build a new house, and we can live there together." Moved by my suggestion, Mother shed tears. However, her condition continued to worsen. Despite the doctor's best efforts, they, along with my sister, seemed to weigh heavily on her. Ultimately, Mother passed away without recovering. When I went to the family home for the funeral, all the valuable items had disappeared. It seemed that my sister and brother-in-law, in need of money, had taken them. Standing in the desolate place, I was overcome with anger. I had to find a way to make my sister take responsibility for Mother's sake and as atonement for what she had done. I resolved to do something. The day after Mother's funeral, my sister and I met at the lawyer's office to discuss the inheritance. Condolences, but as her daughter, I'm entitled to Mother's inheritance. My sister said with a sense of superiority that made me laugh involuntarily. She seemed to be under some misconception. "Let's open the will then." As the lawyer revealed the contents of the will, my sister turned pale. "You're joking. Why, bro? You are not entitled to any of the inheritance. This is in accordance with Dad's wishes." My brother-in-law started to get angry, but the lawyer had nothing else to say except repeat the same thing. "This must be a mistake. Bro is her child, isn't she? My brother-in-law suddenly became furious, throwing things off the table. Are you trying to trick us? We won't let you get away with this. Give us the inheritance now. Aaron, you planned to kill Mother, didn't you? When I asked, my brother-in-law glared at me unpleasantly. Oh, I wouldn't do such a thing. Then why did the medication error occur? My brother-in-law appeared annoyed. I don't know anything about that. It's impossible that I can inherit. You must have done something. My sister was getting more agitated. Now I'm even behind on my condo payments. I was shocked. She hadn't rushed to Mother's side after hearing of her death because she was busy with such matters, hoping for the inheritance. Really, there's nothing left. My sister pressed the lawyer. That seems to be the case. Let me explain in detail. The lawyer explained the details of the inheritance. Ultimately, after deducting what my sister had withdrawn and sold, there was hardly anything left for her to inherit. My sister held her head in dismay. I had discussed this in advance with the lawyer. I found satisfaction with the outcome. Stop joking. There can't be so little. My mother and I hadn't told my sister, but most of Mother's property had already been distributed to my children, her grandchildren. Therefore, there was already little left to inherit. However, my sister kept murmuring her dissatisfaction. I felt nothing but resentment towards my sister, who had lived off the money given by Father and now Mother, thinking she could rest easy knowing I would take care of her. But you just took her money. You are a true disgrace to our parents. I raised my voice in frustration. Caring for someone costs money, you know. Don't you understand? Then show me the receipts for what you spent on Mom's care. I'll cover any necessary expenses. As I extended my hand, my sister turned pale and was at a loss for words. I threw those away. That's not good. Without receipts, it can't be proven as evidence. Hearing the lawyer's words, my sister struggled to find a response. During this, my brother-in-law tried to calm me down. Greg, your sister is in a tough spot. Maybe you could help her out a bit as family. I cannot. My immediate response left my brother-in-law speechless. I've been hurt by my sister for a long time. Frankly, I feel like it's karma, but you're the only siblings, maybe just a little. He tried to say more, but I refused. I was filled with anger, and so was my brother-in-law, apparently. Dan, if that accident had worked out, Rook would have had the entire inheritance. What accident? Before I could ask, my brother-in-law started talking on his own. Because of this brother, things didn't go as planned. I was supposed to get a new car, but now there's barely enough money left even for repairs. My sister tried to stop him, but it was too late. That's a pretty serious statement. You could be accused of fraud. The lawyer held a recorder, smirking at my sister and brother-in-law. What the heck? Isn't that against the rules to do that? You agreed to our conversation being recorded at the beginning, didn't you? Called out by his own words, my brother-in-law's face turned pale. To him, I had one thing to say. Aaron, I will be pressing charges about that accident. Don't joke. Where's the evidence? The evidence has just been provided by you. My sister, crying, began to hit my brother-in-law. You idiot! It's all your fault. Why did you say that? Later, my brother-in-law faced legal consequences for his actions. Additionally, unresolved suspicions about his past emerged, requiring police involvement. For some time, my sister, as an accomplice, was said to face lesser charges. However, struggling with her condo payments, she was turned away by relatives when she asked for money. In contrast, I chose to work earnestly and not rely on inheritance. Now, receiving stock dividends has become a small pleasure in my life. In the aftermath of the legal proceedings, the rift between my sister and me widened. The family bonds that were already strained became nearly non-existent. Despite her attempts to seek support from relatives, my sister faced a cold shoulder and her financial struggles continued. Meanwhile, I focused on building a stable and fulfilling life for my own family, working diligently. I found solace in providing for my wife and children without relying on the tumultuous inheritance battles that had plagued us. The stock dividends became not just a financial benefit, but a symbol of my commitment to a more secure and principled life. Over time, my sister's situation didn't improve. The consequences of her actions weighed heavily on her, both financially and emotionally. It became a stark reminder of the importance of responsible choices and the lasting impact they can have on one's life. As the years passed, I held no ill will towards my sister, recognizing that everyone faces their own battles and makes their own choices. Still, the events that unfolded served as a powerful lesson about the significance of integrity, responsibility, and the enduring consequences of one's actions. In the midst of the turmoil, I found strength in forging ahead with resilience, determined to create a future that wasn't tainted by past misfortunes. The dividends, once a mere financial gain, evolved into a testament to the enduring power of personal growth and the ability to rise above adversity. Life moved forward, and I embraced the opportunities to thrive, leaving behind the shadows of familial discord. The lessons learned from this chapter of my life became an integral part of shaping my values and decisions, ensuring a legacy built on principles rather than the pursuit of material gain. In the end, it was not the inheritance that defined my journey, but the choices made along the way. Choices that led to a life grounded in authenticity, resilience, and a commitment to building a better future for those I cared about the most. Helen reclined in the hallway, her eyes aglow as they fixated on the concert tickets clutched tightly in her grasp. Just as Christina emerged from the office, Helen burst out, "Christina, guess what? We're finally going to see them perform live." Christina paused at the entrance, her face shaded with concern. "Helen, I have some bad news. I can't go," Christina confessed, dodging Helen's questioning gaze. "I have something important to do." A mischievous suspicion flickered in Helen. "Oh, is it a mysterious date you haven't mentioned?" Christina chuckled softly. "No, it's not a date," she said, growing more serious. Helen persisted. "So, what's the reason?" "We've been looking forward to this." Christina shifted uncomfortably. "Please, let's just leave it at that." However, Helen's curiosity was insatiable. When Christina stepped away to get some water, Helen noticed a medical prescription on the coffee table. Unable to resist, she glanced over the paper. "Mrs. Emily Foster," she whispered. Emily was Christina's ex-husband's mother. Upon Christina's return, Helen questioned her. "Why are you still helping your ex-husband's mother, Christina? You've been divorced for a long time. Why keep her in your life?" Christina remained silent for a moment. With a gentle smile, she replied, "Emily's always been good to me. Right now, she needs someone, and that someone is me." Helen sighed. "I just think you deserve better. You're so caring, and you're still alone. You deserve happiness." Christina softly replied, "Caring for Emily brings me a different kind of happiness, Helen." Helen and Christina's friendship seemed genuine on the surface, but it concealed a shadow of true companionship. Hidden beneath their interactions was a bond built on manipulation and selfish intentions. Christina, ever trusting, often overlooked Helen's actions, hoping for the best. However, deep inside, she sensed the uneven nature of their relationship. Whenever they ventured out together, Helen ensured she stood out, from her carefully selected outfits to her attention-grabbing comments and preferred places. It all seemed designed to outshine Christina and keep her in the background. The concert ticket incident was a prime example. Helen bragged about securing tickets to the hottest concert in town without considering Christina's musical preferences. Moreover, during social outings, Helen would make unsolicited comments about Christina's single status, introducing her to any single man present with a voice dripping with pity. As if Christina was a project needing intervention, Christina could see through it. Helen's attempts to play matchmaker were not out of concern for her, but rather to spotlight herself and lure more attention. Christina often felt like a mere accessory in Helen's social game. Christina, a gentle soul, found it hard to decline any invitation, even if it wasn't to her liking. She usually accompanied her friends on their escapades, not wanting to upset anyone. However, today was different. There was another commitment she couldn't ignore. As they approached the bridge, the point where their paths would diverge, Christina could sense Helen's concern. Gathering her thoughts, Christina paused and said, "Helen, I truly appreciate your concern for me. I believe that someday I'll find the right person. Please go on and enjoy yourself. I need to head in a different direction today." Christina inhaled deeply, the crisp cold air filling her lungs. Her thoughts quickly turned to Emily, her mother-in-law. On a normal day, Emily would have started the furnace by now. If she was having one of her painful episodes of migraines and high blood pressure, she'd be confined to her bed. This meant the house would be even colder, especially with the sharp winter chill outside. With a growing sense of urgency, Christina quickened her pace towards the bus stop. Their home was humble, a small house they acquired after her ex-husband lost their previous apartment due to his careless decisions. Glancing at her watch, she calculated that she had about 20 minutes before the bus would arrive. With the week's earnings clasped in her hand, she decided to drop by the pharmacy for some much-needed medication. "Christina, dear, how are things with you and Emily?" Margaret, the kind-hearted pharmacist who had been Emily's neighbor for years, greeted her warmly. "Hi, Margaret. Everything's much the same, no big changes," Christina replied with a small smile. "Dear Christina, Emily is truly fortunate to have you. Despite all that's happened, you've stayed by her side," Margaret remarked with a hint of admiration in her eyes. Christina responded softly, "Emily is like family to me." Margaret shook her hand with a mixture of disbelief and pity. "I'll never understand how a woman as good-hearted as Emily could have raised such a son." Collecting the medications and expressing her gratitude, Christina left the pharmacy, her heart heavy with the weight of her thoughts. She had always been a firm believer in serendipity. The day she bumped into Stephen at a local coffee shop, their eyes locked, and it felt as though the universe had conspired for that very moment. The connection was palpable. It wasn't long before they began dating. And as the days turned into weeks and weeks into months, Christina found herself falling deeply in love with him. 6 whirlwind months later, as they watched the sunset from their favorite spot at the beach, Stephen, with a nervous smile and eyes filled with hope, proposed marriage. Christina, her heart racing, agreed instantly. However, she couldn't help but point out that she hadn't even met his parents yet. Understanding her concerns, Stephen took her to his mother's house the following weekend. Emily, Stephen's mother, greeted them with a warm smile and open arms. It was a surprise to Christina how quickly she bonded with her. They would chat for hours, share stories, and by the end of the day, it felt as though they had known each other for years. Emily held a special fondness for Christina, evident in the approving gaze she cast upon her, her eyes sparkling with warmth. A few weeks later, Christina received an unexpected call from Emily. The tone in Emily's voice was both eager and nervous as she invited Christina to visit her. Sensing something amiss when she arrived, Christina sat down over a pot of tea. Emily took a deep breath and shared a shocking revelation. Stephen had been married twice before. Christina listened intently, her mind swirling with a whirlwind of emotions. What stood out, however, was a concern in Emily's voice. "He's my son, and I love him," Emily began, "but I don't want to see your heart get broken." Christina was surprised and puzzled. It wasn't every day that a mother revealed such a personal detail about her son. Still, she thanked Emily for her candor, although taken aback. Their conversation concluded with an embrace, but as Christina stepped out, her mind was clouded with mixed emotions. In the subsequent days, introspection filled Christina's thoughts. She decided against confronting Stephen, holding on to the belief that everyone deserved redemption, and past actions should remain in the past. After all, Stephen's daily gestures painted a picture of a man who was devoted, considerate, and genuinely loved her. Time flew, and soon they were exchanging vows with loved ones around them, including a teary-eyed Emily, as they embarked on their marital journey. Christina occasionally reflected on her heart-to-heart with Emily. It served as a reminder of the value of trust, open dialogue, and the realization that everyone carries a past. Christina often thought back to that pivotal moment. Their quaint home stood as a reminder of what once was. Stephen, with his lofty ambitions, had convinced her to sell their apartment and invest the money in a seemingly promising business idea. Worse yet, he had persuaded his unsuspecting mother, Emily, to do the same. As the days unfolded, Stephen came clean about the grim reality. Not only had he lost every penny from their apartment sales, but he had also dug them deep into debt. Both Emily and Christina felt the weight of the betrayal, overwhelmed not just with shattered trust, but also relentless and intimidating phone calls from debtors. In her heart, Christina wanted to believe they were just facing the growing pains any young family might experience. She clung to the hope that they'd find a way out, and things would eventually get better. Yet, a more ominous cloud loomed, adding another layer of worry to an already strained household. Within the first year of their marriage, the pressure of not conceiving started to create cracks in their bond. Christina and Stephen had envisioned a life where they'd raise children together. Christina tried to stay positive and understanding, but Stephen's patience wore thin. His reluctance to consult a doctor was driven by a mix of fear and old-fashioned notions equating manhood with the ability to father children. One chilly evening, following yet another quiet meal, Stephen's bottled-up emotions erupted. "Perhaps you're the reason we can't start a family," he spat out. Christina was stunned and hurt by the baseless allegation, especially since they hadn't even taken a step towards seeking medical advice. The once harmonious atmosphere of their home was now punctuated by regular disputes. The warmth and intimacy that once characterized their relationship had evaporated, replaced by a cold detachment. The final straw came when Stephen, in a desperate move, revealed he was seeing another woman, hoping she would provide him with the family he yearned for. Christina's world fell apart. The love and trust she had placed in Stephen felt like a distant memory. Raised with traditional values, she had always believed in the enduring bond of marriage and the promise of forever. Stephen wasn't just her husband. He was her first and only love. Emily was beside herself with anger when she learned the truth. "How can you walk away from someone so genuine?" she demanded of Stephen. Over the years, Emily had come to see Christina as the daughter she never had. Her son's actions felt like a betrayal not just to Christina, but to her as well. Yet Stephen, blinded by his desires, just turned his back and left. He eventually married his new flame, and as days flowed into weeks and weeks into months, his new wife never made an effort to visit or connect with Emily. This sense of being abandoned by her son and ignored by his new wife left Emily grappling with immense loneliness and sorrow. Christina could see the pain and nostalgia in Emily's eyes. After a pause, Emily gestured for Christina to sit beside her and began to share a tale from her past. "Christina, when I was about your age, I was engaged to a kind man named Howard. I thought of him as the love of my life. I also had a close friend named Lucy, or so I believed. As the wedding preparations were in full swing, I learned that Howard had fallen for Lucy. To make matters worse, Lucy became pregnant with his child. The betrayal was overwhelming. The man I loved and my supposed best friend had turned my world upside down. Heartbroken, I watched as they moved away to start a new life together. However, a couple of years later, an unexpected call from Lucy left me in a state of distress. Lucy, who was Howard's ex-wife, confessed that Howard had left her. Struggling to find love again as a single mother, Lucy often turned to drink to drown her loneliness and regrets. While I pitied her situation, it was the thought of their young son that truly weighed on my heart. Lucy's health deteriorated rapidly, and realizing she had limited time, she asked me to care for her son Stephen. The bond I developed with him was instant, even though he served as a constant reminder of my past heartache. I couldn't abandon him, especially after Lucy's passing. Her dying wish was for me to always be there for Stephen, and I willingly accepted, having grown genuinely fond of the boy. Christina listened, tears welling in her eyes, realizing the depth of Emily's compassion and the intricate ties that bound their shared history. "Christina, why are you so kind?" Emily asked, taken aback. "Oh, Emily," Christina whispered, understanding the parallels in their stories. Both had experienced heartbreaking betrayals from those they believed loved them the most. It was as if history had repeated itself, and they were bound together by shared pain. Christina was heartbroken, seeing how Stephen's neglect affected Emily, making her fall ill frequently. Eventually, Emily had a stroke. Many friends suggested that Christina move Emily to a specialized care center, arguing that Emily's condition might be beyond her capabilities. And after all, Emily wasn't truly her family. However, Emily and Christina saw each other differently. Christina saw them as family, and she was determined to care for Emily. Christina held onto the belief that with enough love and care, Emily would regain her strength and walk again, despite the doctor's doubts. Emily's determination never wavered. Christina gently inquired, "Did you ever think of searching for Howard?" Emily took a moment, then sighed. "I loved Howard deeply, but I never searched for him. I thought, why should I? He probably had a family of his own by then." As Christina stepped off the bus and started her walk home, the sight of smoke billowing from her chimney brought a momentary sense of relief. It meant Emily had managed to light the stove. However, that relief was short-lived. An ambulance stood outside their house, frosted over, indicating it had been there for some time. Panic rolled up inside Christina as she quickened her steps, her mind filled with anxious thoughts. Rushing inside with her heart in her throat, she learned that Emily had suffered another stroke. When Emily finally regained consciousness, she felt a dull ache on her left side. Trying to speak, her words didn't come out clearly. Christina, with deep blue eyes full of warmth, reassured her. "Don't worry, Emily. You had another stroke, but you were strong enough to call for help. I'm here with you." Despite advice from her colleagues and friends, Christina left her job. Many couldn't understand why she would choose to care for the mother of a man who had once hurt her deeply. But for Christina, it wasn't just about that. She often thought about how she would feel if she were in Emily's position, facing loneliness and health challenges. She knew that if their roles were reversed, she would hope for someone to stand by her side, just as she was doing for Emily now. Christina's empathy and understanding went beyond past grievances. She wanted to be there for Emily, no matter what others thought. Over time, Emily began to regain her strength, and Christina became her rock during those challenging weeks. She cheered Emily on during her speech therapy sessions, held her hand as she took her first shaky steps, and laughed joyfully as they twirled around the living room in a makeshift dance. Upon returning to her job, Christina discovered a new management team in place, with Eddie as the new owner of the company. Eddie admired Christina's dedication to an elderly lady, not realizing the depth of their connection. Christina's commitment inspired him, and he found her intriguing. Helen, in contrast, was the buzzing bee of the office, known for her sociable tendencies and vibrant nature. One busy day, a critical project landed on their desk, and Eddie, as a team leader, delegated tasks. He handed the most demanding parts to Christina, trusting her proven track record. While Helen received a smaller yet important portion, Christina steadily worked through her tasks, occasionally checked in by Eddie, always met with a nod of assurance. In contrast, Helen found herself struggling, and her frequent coffee breaks and chats began to hamper her pace. As the deadline loomed closer, the office atmosphere grew tense. Eddie found a distraught Helen in the kitchen, and she admitted, "I've fallen behind." Eddie, concerned, approached her, asking, "Everything all right, Helen?" "I believe I could handle it," Eddie assured her, attempting to comfort Helen. "Don't worry, we'll work something out." At that moment, Christina entered the kitchen for a quick coffee refill. Observing Helen's distress, she offered, "I can chip in after I'm done with my part." This surprised both Helen and Eddie. When Christina handed in her portion of the project, Eddie was left amazed. Not only had she meticulously completed her assigned tasks, but she had also gone the extra mile, adding thoughtful recommendations that no one had even considered. On a particularly stressful day, Christina found a surprise at her desk, a vibrant bouquet of flowers. She paused, half expecting someone to realize they had mistakenly placed the flowers on her desk. Although the colorful blooms brightened her space, Christina couldn't help but wonder who had thought of her in such a kind way. Helen, always in the loop with office gossip, found herself taken aback by the unexpected turn of events. While she usually enjoyed being the go-to for office news, it was strange to see someone as reserved as Christina become the talk of the town. Christina, in the midst of solving the bouquet puzzle, discovered a dainty card nestled amidst the petals. It carried a sweet message in neat handwriting. "For the light you bring, even when you're not aware." However, there was no name or hint of the sender. Seen from the procurement department couldn't help but drop by, grinning cheekily. "Looks like someone's smitten with you," he remarked, giving her a playful wink. Flustered, Christina replied, "I really can't figure out who sent them." Throughout the morning, Christina's desk became a hot topic. Speculations ran wild, jokes were cracked, and everyone seemed to have a theory about the mystery sender. Helen, trying to reclaim her role as the office storyteller, teased, "I bet it's from that handsome new guy in finance," gesturing towards a young man in a wheelchair. Soon, others joined in with their own humorous takes on Christina's secret admirer. By noon, the attention became too much for Christina. Though she loved the flowers, the constant buzz around them turned her quiet day topsy-turvy. Needing a breather, she decided to slip away for a quiet lunch outside. A few days later, Christina was engrossed in her work when a courier suddenly appeared at her desk, holding an extravagant basket of flowers. Christina, surprised, nodded as the courier handed her a slip to sign. Helen couldn't resist approaching to inspect the bouquet, a glint of envy in her eyes. Another surprise awaited Christina. Helen, always quick with remarks, asked, "What's the story this time?" Despite being younger and, in her own opinion, more attractive, Helen couldn't fathom why Christina was receiving such attention. Christina, slightly embarrassed, responded, "I honestly don't know. It could be a mix-up." Helen, not one to back down, insinuated, "I've never heard about any romantic interests in your life. Did you order these for yourself, maybe to pretend someone's interested?" Choosing not to engage with Helen's comments, Christina returned to her work, leaving the flowers as an unsolved mystery. Every day, like clockwork, a fresh bouquet appeared at Christina's desk. The office buzzed with whispers and chuckles, and Helen's attempts to tease Christina continued. Despite the office gossip, Christina remained silent about the mystery sender. The relentless flower deliveries were starting to affect her concentration at work, not because of the flowers themselves, but due to the incessant chatter around them. Christina needed to discover who was behind this and why, as the mystery had become an unwelcome distraction. Christina was about to head out for lunch when a man held the main door open for her. Surprised, she stopped, realizing he was wearing a chauffeur's cap and uniform. Before she could say anything, he escorted her to a sleek sit-in parked in front of the office building and opened the passenger door for her. Feeling like she was in a daze, Christina wondered if this was even real. She pinched herself to make sure she wasn't dreaming. Finally, she spoke up, unable to contain her curiosity any longer. "Excuse me, sir, but what's going on? What does all this mean? Who's behind all this?" Her voice was tinged with bewilderment. The driver looked puzzled at first, but then broke into a warm smile. "You'll find out soon enough, madame. Please have a seat in the car." The whole situation felt like something out of a movie, and Christina was both anxious and excited to see what would happen next. The car smoothly made its way to one of the city's most elegant restaurants. The grand entrance was lit with soft lights, and as Christina stepped inside, The gentle hum of conversation greeted her. A smiling waiter instantly recognized her and motioned her to follow him as they weaved through tables. Christina spotted someone seated at a secluded spot in the back. His back was turned to her, making it impossible to recognize him immediately. With every step, her heartbeat quickened. Who could it be? Why were they meeting in such a secretive manner? Finally, she stood in front of the table, and before she could ask anything, the man turned around and greeted her. "Hello, Christina. Please join me." To her astonishment, it was Eddie, the new owner of the company. The soft glow of the table's candlelight highlighted his features, and he wore a gentle smile. Christina was filled with a mix of surprise, curiosity, and a dash of nervousness. When Eddie first learned of Christina's heartwarming actions towards her former mother-in-law, he found it hard to believe such acts of kindness were rare. Genuinely astonished, he decided to verify the story for himself by visiting Emily while Christina was away at work. Introducing himself as a colleague from her office, checking in to see if Christina's extended leave was for a genuine reason, Eddie realized that all he'd heard about Christina's dedication and kindness was true. Beyond his professional curiosity, Eddie had a personal reason for wanting to learn more about Christina. For years, he had remained single, and his mother often urged him to find someone special and settle down. Eddie would lament how many people seemed to prioritize material wealth over genuine feelings and connections. For him, it wasn't about physical appearance. He was drawn to a person's inner character and values. Knowing Christina's selfless actions towards Emily deepened his intrigue and respect for her. During their lunch, Christina chuckled, and Eddie looked slightly embarrassed. "I apologize if it was overwhelming. I just thought you deserve something beautiful every day." He hesitated before adding, "Honestly, I didn't know how to approach you directly. I've never really tried to win someone over before, so I guess I went a bit overboard with the flowers as a way to show my interest," Eddie admitted. Christina shook her head in amusement. "Well, thanks to your little gesture, there's a running joke in the office that I've been sending them to myself." Eddie laughed heartily, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "I guess we've given them quite the story, haven't we?" During their lunch, Christina felt the need to be open about her past. Taking a deep breath, she said, "Before things progress further, there's something I need to share with you. I was married once before." Eddie looked at her with understanding eyes and a gentle smile. "I already know about it," he replied softly. "Your past is a part of you, but it doesn't define the present. We all have stories." This made her feel even more at ease, realizing that Eddie valued who she was now rather than dwelling on what once was. Eddie and Christina began spending more time together. It wasn't formal dating, but more of a slow exploration. Having navigated the rocky terrain of a failed marriage before, Christina was wary of diving in too quickly. They decided to keep their budding relationship under wraps for the time being. With Emily recovering well, Christina felt like she was living in a dream. Everything seemed to be falling into place. However, when Eddie mentioned promoting her, she immediately declined. She didn't want to be under the office microscope or the subject of speculation. "If you need assistance, I'm here to help, but please, let's keep it discreet," she told him. This response only deepened Eddie's admiration for her. He felt he had indeed found someone genuine to stand by his side. However, secrets have a way of unraveling. One day, a colleague spotted Eddie and Christina in an intimate moment outside of work. The rumor mill went into overdrive, and whispers of their relationship began circulating the office. When Helen caught wind of the gossip, she was livid. She cornered Christina, bombarding her with a barrage of questions. Christina, maintaining her composure, said nothing. This silence confirmed Helen's suspicions. Envy consumed her, and she hatched a plan to tarnish Christina's image. She started spreading fabricated tales of Christina's past, alleging that Christina's ex-husband had left her due to financial recklessness on her part. Helen's jealousy was no secret. She had tried multiple times to ensnare Eddie with her charms, but he remained impervious. Eddie would laugh off Helen's flirty remarks and dinner invites, always citing his busy schedule as a reason. One day, Helen stormed into Eddie's office, her face flushed with anger. "I can't believe you're seriously considering a relationship with Christina. Do you even know her past?" She stormed out, leaving Eddie calm. Armed with the truth that he had painstakingly gathered, he confronted Helen. "I'm aware that Christina was married," he replied, standing up and walking toward the window. "I also know why her husband left her. He left her for another woman." Eddie paused, his eyes locking onto Helen's as he turned back around. "And that woman, Helen, was you?" Helen was dumbfounded, her face a mix of shock and disbelief. She never thought her secret would be uncovered, but she had underestimated Eddie. Eddie was no novice when it came to due diligence. After speaking with Emily, he tracked down Christina's ex-husband, Stephen, and offered him a sum of money for the truth. The promise of quick cash loosened Stephen's lips, revealing the real story. The room went silent, the air heavy with the weight of the revealed secret. Helen's schemes had caught up to her, unraveling in the moment of stark revelation. Helen, once the chatterbox of the office, had retreated into the shadows. Christina always wanted to think the best of people, was concerned for her once close friend. When Helen suddenly stopped coming to work, Christina felt a pang of sadness. But when she asked Eddie about Helen's abrupt departure, he shared that she had decided to move and begin anew. Amidst all of this, Christina had a significant event coming up: meeting Eddie's mother, Grace. It was an important milestone for any couple. Since Christina's parents were no longer around, she brought Emily, her former mother-in-law, with her to dinner. Grace was elegant, her years of meticulous work as an accountant giving her a sharp, attentive gaze. From the moment Christina introduced Emily, the two clicked. Both had experienced so much in life, and as the evening progressed, they exchanged stories, laughed together, and found comfort in each other's company. It was clear to Eddie and Christina that a beautiful friendship was blossoming between Emily and Grace. As Christina became more involved in Eddie's business ventures, their professional collaboration turned heads in the office. Whispers turned into open discussions, and before long, everyone knew about their romance. The two had become the most talked about couple at the company, but this time for all the right reasons. At the office parking lot, a familiar car caught Christina's eye. The office was almost deserted, with everyone heading off to celebrate New Year's Eve with their families. As Christina was about to head home after wrapping up her final report, Eddie stepped out from behind the parked car, holding a huge bouquet of pristine white roses. "Come on, it's New Year's Eve. Work can wait," Eddie playfully chastised her, laughing. Christina replied, "I'm sorry, love. Just had that one last report to wrap up." That night, in the warmth of Eddie's home, they enjoyed an intimate dinner. During a quiet moment, Emily arose from her seat, her eyes shimmering with tears. She gazed deeply at Christina, emotion evident in her voice. "I might have lost Stephen, but in his place, I gained a precious daughter and a wonderful son." Fast forward 2 months, Eddie and Christina were happily married. In another 4 months, Christina decided to resign from her job. At Eddie's gentle insistence, the couple had even more joyous news. They were expecting a baby. Christina's story was a testament to the power of resilience and kindness. Despite life's challenges, she held onto the values her parents had taught her: to always lend a helping hand and to be kind. As they said, kindness would always come back to you, sometimes even tenfold.
It became apparent that Charles's employee, Junior, had been openly undermining his leadership, going so far as to dismiss Charles as a competent boss altogether. Charles overheard these disparaging remarks, which led to a tense confrontation between the two. In hindsight, Charles should have realized the importance of fostering a stronger relationship with his team. On the other hand, I received an offer to relocate to our company's overseas headquarters. Initially, I declined, weighed down by the ongoing issues and wanting to be supportive of Charles during his turbulent time. However, after much thought, I accepted the position and am now preparing for the move. My father, understandably concerned, has been adjusting to the idea, and we've started practicing video calls to stay connected once I leave. This new role has been a lifelong dream of mine, and I'm eager to pour my energy into this exciting opportunity. As for Charles, he rarely contributed to household chores, yet this never seemed to bother Angela. When they went out, Charles typically took the lead, allowing Angela to relax and enjoy herself without stress. Their relationship seemed balanced, or at least it appeared that way. Everything shifted when Angela's mother suddenly passed away. Angela was at work when her father called to inform her that her mother's condition had taken a sharp turn for the worse, and she had collapsed. Rushing to the hospital, Angela barely had time to say her goodbyes. She decided to stay with her father to help manage the funeral arrangements. When she informed Charles, he claimed he couldn't leave work on such short notice. As a result, he missed the wake and only arrived in time for the funeral. Unprepared for the occasion, Charles hadn't even dressed appropriately, and I found myself in a frantic scramble to find something suitable for him to wear. Despite my efforts, he made no effort to hide his irritation, blaming me for not having prepared his clothes in advance. The heavy emotions surrounding the funeral, along with the responsibilities that came with it, made Charles's complaints even harder to bear. I eventually decided to ignore them, hoping to avoid a confrontation, but this only seemed to worsen his mood. Since that day, our marriage has become increasingly strained, with arguments becoming more frequent. Disagreements aren't uncommon after 4 years of marriage, but Charles's behavior has grown more combative. He constantly insists on making decisions and dictating what I should do, and it's been draining. I've tried to push back a few times, but his unfamiliarity with the simplest things in our home has turned minor tasks into drawn-out frustrations, accompanied by his never-ending grumbling. As time went on, I realized it was often easier to handle things on my own. Even though Charles continues to make demands, I haven't always followed his instructions, opting instead to take care of tasks independently to keep my life running smoothly. Recently, I brought up the upcoming gathering to mark the first anniversary of my mother's passing. When I reminded Charles, his response was indifferent at best. He complained about an important meeting scheduled on the same day, questioning how he could possibly attend the memorial. His excuse was that he couldn't delegate his work, especially since his recent promotion, which he never missed a chance to flaunt to his junior staff. I was barely able to contain my frustration as I tried to convey how important the memorial was to me. It was painfully clear that he prioritized his new title and responsibilities, often leaving me to manage everything on my own. No matter how much I urged him to focus on our family's needs, his work always seemed to come first. Later that evening, when I finally arrived home from work, I found Charles sprawled on the couch, a beer in hand. "Sorry, I'm late. Had to stay for overtime," I explained, already sensing his annoyance that dinner had been delayed. His response was sharp. "I've been waiting here for an hour." While it had only been an hour, and knowing that cooking wasn't his strong suit, it baffled me that he hadn't thought to get something to eat in the meantime. I had told him when I'd be home. After all, trying to keep my irritation in check, I handed him a takeout box and said, "I thought cooking would take too long tonight, so I grabbed this on the way home." Charles's reaction was swift and cutting, slamming his beer glass onto the table. "Takeout again? You're really slacking off lately, aren't you?" His words stung, especially considering it had been nearly 3 weeks since we last ordered takeout. Yes, I had been busy and couldn't cook every night, but I always ensured we had balanced meals and didn't rely on processed food. His uncalled-for critique left me debating whether I should even respond. Sensing my silence as an admission of guilt, Charles pressed on, adding insult to injury. Can't argue when it's true. Huh? You should start doing your chores properly. You've been coming home late, claiming overtime, maybe you're just out cheating. His accusation ignited the resentment simmering inside me. If you know I'm working late, the least you could do is make dinner. I shot back. You don't even have to cook. Picking up takeout isn't that hard. I always tell you when I'll be home, and despite my workload, I manage all the household chores. There's no need for that attitude. His response was a sharp glare, followed by a low blow. You're 4 years older. Remember? I could have married a younger woman, but I chose you. He spoke as though I should be grateful, like his choice of me was a favor I didn't deserve. You should be thankful and listen to me. No one else would want you. His words were meant to belittle me, but instead, they revealed just how broken our communication and respect for each other had become. So, if I left, you'd be in trouble, right? My anger boiled over. If you wanted a younger woman, you should have married one before we got together. I asked you if you were fine with my age, and you said yes. That's why we're married. But trust me, I can manage just fine without you. Charles responded with a mocking laugh. Fine, then let's get a divorce, he said, grabbing his beer and the takeout before storming off to his room. We had fought plenty of times before, but this argument felt different, like we had crossed a line. I was tired of his constant disrespect. I sat down with my takeout, trying to calm myself, hoping maybe he was just hungry and irritable, but as I ate, the weight of our conversation hung heavily on me, especially with my mom's death anniversary just around the corner. After some time, I called out to him from outside his door. We need to leave by 7 a.m. tomorrow, so I'll wake you up around 6 o'clock. There was no response, though I was sure he was awake. I went to bed, feeling a mix of exhaustion and unease. The next morning, I woke up early to find that Charles was already gone. The bags I had packed for us were still in the room. He hadn't left for the gathering without me. So, where had he gone? I tried calling his phone, but there was no answer. He ignored my texts too, left with no choice. I left him a voicemail and started getting ready on my own. As I waited for the train at the station, Charles finally picked up. I have a meeting. Can't leave it to my juniors, he said curtly before hanging up. I stood there, staring at my phone, feeling a mix of anger and resignation. I stood there, stunned and bewildered, as the train arrived. With no time to dwell on it, I boarded, struggling with the luggage meant for both of us. When I finally reached my father's house, his anxious eyes met mine as he asked, "Where's Charles?" Seeing the lingering sadness in his eyes since my mother's passing, I didn't want to add to his worries. Forcing a smile, I took a deep breath and replied, "Sorry. He got called into an important meeting. He was supposed to come." Charles's recent promotion made for a convenient excuse, and I reassured my father that his absence was work-related and important. My father nodded understandingly. I know he's working hard. It's a shame not to see him, but your mother would have understood. Let him know he's always welcome here, he said softly. There was a hint of sadness in his words, but I kept my smile intact throughout the day, refusing to show how much it hurt. The day passed without a word from Charles, and as night settled in, I chose not to reach out either. I decided to stay the night at my father's house and return home the next day. As planned, though it felt almost childish, the thought of making Charles his favorite meal, hamburgers, crossed my mind for when I got home. The following day, I left my father's house and returned home around noon. Before heading out to the grocery store, I wanted to drop off my bags. As I walked into the living room, I immediately noticed Charles's dirty laundry scattered across the floor, a sight I was all too familiar with. With a sigh, I thought, he still hasn't learned how to use the washing machine. I tossed his clothes in with mine, and after a brief moment, headed back to the living room. That's when something caught my eye. Sitting on the table, as if left deliberately in plain view, were divorce papers, already signed by Charles. My heart sank. Was this really how he wanted to communicate that he was serious about ending our marriage? Staring at the papers in disbelief, a storm of emotions surged through me. Grabbing my phone, I hesitated for a second before calling him, unsure if he'd even pick up during his lunch break. To my surprise, he answered almost immediately. "What's the meaning of these divorce papers?" I demanded, my voice a blend of confusion and anger. Charles responded with a cold, mocking laugh. "What's there to question? It's exactly what it looks like. I don't want an older wife who won't do her chores. That's why I want a divorce. If we split, I can find a younger wife. A wife's like a status symbol, right? I can't exactly boast about you." His words hit me like a punch, reducing our years together to nothing more than a transaction, turning what I had believed to be a partnership into something shallow and superficial. Charles continued, his tone indifferent. "It's tough when my team asks about you. It's awkward avoiding the topic." I was speechless. His blunt criticism was stunning, and I found myself unable to respond. "If you don't want a divorce, then start doing your chores properly," he continued, as if this was a reasonable request. "I'll be home as usual tonight, so don't forget to grab some beer. If you disagree, take the divorce papers to court. It's up to you." With that, he hung up, leaving me reeling, my mind spinning with shock and disbelief. Charles probably assumed I'd give in to his demands, thinking that I did the housework because I was afraid of losing him or worried about appearing incompetent. Perhaps he saw himself as the dominant figure in our marriage. Some might think being married to a younger man sounds exciting, but in reality, it was far from glamorous. I had often played up his youth, but if I was honest, Charles was painfully average in looks, personality, and income. There was nothing exceptional about him. Describing him as younger had merely been convenient. When we first got married, the 4-year age gap had seemed more noticeable, but now, in our 30s, it felt trivial. It was exhausting to constantly be labeled the older wife when we were essentially the same age. Fed up with his arrogance and the hollow foundation of our marriage, I grabbed my bag and headed straight to the family court. Submitting those divorce papers felt like lifting a weight off my chest. As I walked out of the courthouse, a sense of relief washed over me. I realized then that I didn't need Charles to feel complete. With the promise of newfound freedom, I felt lighter, as though I had finally stepped out from under a cloud that had long been looming over me. This was the end of our marriage, but the beginning of a life where I could truly live on my own terms. Seizing the opportunity, I decided to take a few days off from work. Fortunately, my boss understood and granted me a week's leave, as work had slowed down. Now that I was officially divorced, it was time to get my life in order. With only a few possessions, the cleaning and packing were straightforward. I stored the larger items in a storage unit, packed the essentials and clothes into my car, and on a whim, decided to visit a hot spring resort. During the off-season, I easily found a budget-friendly hotel and set off, thrilled to start this new chapter of my life. I was savoring the peaceful atmosphere of the hot springs and enjoying the relaxation of my hotel room when my phone rang abruptly. "Angela, didn't I ask you to get beer? Where are you?" It was Charles, sounding puzzled and slightly irritated. It was around the time he usually returned home from work. I couldn't help but chuckle as I answered, "I'm at a hot spring resort." "A hot spring resort? Why? What's going on?" Charles's voice carried a mix of confusion and agitation. "Didn't you say I should file for divorce if I disagreed with you?" I reminded him, picturing his stunned expression, which made me laugh even more. "Wait, did you actually file them?" His tone shifted from bewildered to frustrated. "Yes, I did. You suggested it, Charles. Have you forgotten what you said?" I replied, still amused by his reaction. Charles's voice, now tinged with anxiety, showed his disbelief. Wait, are you joking? When you say hot spring resort, do you mean some nearby spa? If so, I'll get dinner. Come home soon. I couldn't help but laugh at his sudden shift to a seemingly considerate tone, as if he was trying to play the caring husband. It took me about an hour and a half to drive here. There's even an outdoor natural hot spring. It's incredibly relaxing. I hope it doesn't rain tomorrow. Since you're getting dinner, I've already packed my things, so you won't have to worry about me coming back. Take care of yourself. Charles pleaded for me to return, but I had no intention of going back. You're the one who initiated the divorce. Have you forgotten? It was clear you were using the threat of divorce to control me. I told him firmly. I can manage without you now that you've divorced your older wife. Go ahead and find a younger one if you can. Whether you succeed or not is no longer my concern, I said firmly. Charles fell silent, clearly taken aback by my determination. After a moment, he spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. But you should consider moving out of that apartment. Why should I? I responded calmly, though I had already considered this myself. Think about your income. You'll end up broke if you stay there. You can't clean, do laundry, or cook. You'll need housekeeping and dining out, which costs money. It would be a problem if most of your salary goes towards rent, he reasoned. I couldn't help but smile slightly. You thought you were the provider, but my salary is nearly double yours. You never really provided for me, if anything. It was the other way around, I said, cutting to the core of the issue. Also, you were overly confident because of one junior. But did you know I manage multiple juniors and even more beneath them? I usually keep work to myself because you get moody, but I outrank you in both position and salary. You'd think you would have noticed after living together. It seemed like Charles was just now realizing this, possibly because he had kept his ego intact by looking down on me. Now that his delusion was shattered, he must have felt defeated. I had struck a blow to his pride, a kind of retribution for all these years. The reason I had handled household chores without complaint, despite his domineering attitude, was partly because he was younger and I had given him some leeway, and partly because it was too much trouble to ask him for anything. It's not like I needed you to stay with me. I was just managing your needs along with my own. So when you said, do the chores, or we divorce, of course, I chose divorce. We're strangers now. Goodbye, I said firmly before ending the call. Feeling a sense of liberation, I enjoyed a delicious meal at the hotel afterward. Charles, evidently still clinging to the idea of reconciliation, attempted to reach out again, but I was already relishing the newfound freedom and independence in my life. When he called once more, I greeted him with a knowing smile. Remember, I'm older than you. I'm sure you wouldn't want me back. It seemed that Charles's search for companionship with younger women had not been successful. Eventually, he realized his situation was not favorable and decided to move out of the apartment. To handle the division of assets, I hired a lawyer to ensure I received more than just an equitable split. I sought additional compensation to reflect the years I had managed most of the household chores. Charles, always looking to cut costs, opted against hiring legal representation, giving me a considerable advantage. With the help of my lawyer, we secured a settlement that was highly favorable to me. I was satisfied with the outcome and relieved to have resolved the matter. Meanwhile, Charles's troubles at work were only beginning. His junior team member had been openly critical of his leadership, undermining his authority by declaring he wasn't a proper boss. Charles discovered these complaints, leading to a heated argument, another clear sign of the importance of nurturing and supporting your team, something Charles had evidently neglected. In terms of my career, I had been offered a highly sought-after position at our company's overseas headquarters. Initially, I hesitated to accept due to the personal upheavals and out of consideration for Charles. However, With my personal situation evolving, I decided to embrace the opportunity wholeheartedly. I am now actively preparing for this exciting transition. Though it has caused some concern for my father, we've adapted by practicing video calls to stay connected once I'm abroad. I feel content and excited about the future, ready to fully commit to this new chapter of my life. It's time to pursue the career I've always dreamed of, confident that I've made the right decisions for my future. It became apparent that Charles's employee, Junior, had been openly undermining his leadership, going so far as to dismiss Charles as a competent boss altogether. Charles overheard these disparaging remarks, which led to a tense confrontation between the two. In hindsight, Charles should have realized the importance of fostering a stronger relationship with his team. On the other hand, I received an offer to relocate to our company's overseas headquarters. Initially, I declined, weighed down by the ongoing issues and wanting to be supportive of Charles during his turbulent time. However, after much thought, I accepted the position and am now preparing for the move. My father, understandably concerned, has been adjusting to the idea, and we've started practicing video calls to stay connected once I leave. This new role has been a lifelong dream of mine, and I'm eager to pour my energy into this exciting opportunity. As for Charles, he rarely contributed to household chores, yet this never seemed to bother Angela. When they went out, Charles typically took the lead, allowing Angela to relax and enjoy herself without stress. Their relationship seemed balanced, or at least it appeared that way. Everything shifted when Angela's mother suddenly passed away. Angela was at work when her father called to inform her that her mother's condition had taken a sharp turn for the worse, and she had collapsed. Rushing to the hospital, Angela barely had time to say her goodbyes. She decided to stay with her father to help manage the funeral arrangements. When she informed Charles, he claimed he couldn't leave work on such short notice. As a result, he missed the wake and only arrived in time for the funeral. Unprepared for the occasion, Charles hadn't even dressed appropriately, and I found myself in a frantic scramble to find something suitable for him to wear. Despite my efforts, he made no effort to hide his irritation, blaming me for not having prepared his clothes in advance. The heavy emotions surrounding the funeral, along with the responsibilities that came with it, made Charles's complaints even harder to bear. I eventually decided to ignore them, hoping to avoid a confrontation, but this only seemed to worsen his mood. Since that day, our marriage has become increasingly strained, with arguments becoming more frequent. Disagreements aren't uncommon after 4 years of marriage, but Charles's behavior has grown more combative. He constantly insists on making decisions and dictating what I should do, and it's been draining. I've tried to push back a few times, but his unfamiliarity with the simplest things in our home has turned minor tasks into drawn-out frustrations, accompanied by his never-ending grumbling. As time went on, I realized it was often easier to handle things on my own. Even though Charles continues to make demands, I haven't always followed his instructions, opting instead to take care of tasks independently to keep my life running smoothly. Recently, I brought up the upcoming gathering to mark the first anniversary of my mother's passing. When I reminded Charles, his response was indifferent at best. He complained about an important meeting scheduled on the same day, questioning how he could possibly attend the memorial. His excuse was that he couldn't delegate his work, especially since his recent promotion, which he never missed a chance to flaunt to his junior staff. I was barely able to contain my frustration as I tried to convey how important the memorial was to me. It was painfully clear that he prioritized his new title and responsibilities, often leaving me to manage everything on my own. No matter how much I urged him to focus on our family's needs, his work always seemed to come first. Later that evening, When I finally arrived home from work, I found Charles sprawled on the couch, a beer in hand. "Sorry, I'm late. Had to stay for overtime," I explained, already sensing his annoyance that dinner had been delayed. His response was sharp. "I've been waiting here for an hour." While it had only been an hour, and knowing that cooking wasn't his strong suit, it baffled me that he hadn't thought to get something to eat in the meantime. I had told him when I'd be home. After all, trying to keep my irritation in check, I handed him a takeout box and said, "I thought cooking would take too long tonight, so I grabbed this on the way home." Charles's reaction was swift and cutting, slamming his beer glass onto the table. "Takeout again? You're really slacking off lately, aren't you?" His words stung, especially considering it had been nearly 3 weeks since we last ordered takeout. Yes, I had been busy and couldn't cook every night, but I always ensured we had balanced meals and didn't rely on processed food. His uncalled-for critique left me debating whether I should even respond. Sensing my silence as an admission of guilt, Charles pressed on, adding insult to injury. "Can't argue when it's true. Huh? You should start doing your chores properly. You've been coming home late, claiming overtime. Maybe you're just out cheating." His accusation ignited the resentment simmering inside me. "If you know I'm working late, the least you could do is make dinner," I shot back. "You don't even have to cook. Picking up takeout isn't that hard. I always tell you when I'll be home, and despite my workload, I manage all the household chores. There's no need for that attitude." His response was a sharp glare, followed by a low blow. "You're 4 years older. Remember? I could have married a younger woman, but I chose you." He spoke as though I should be grateful, like his choice of me was a favor I didn't deserve. "You should be thankful and listen to me. No one else would want you." His words were meant to belittle me, but instead, they revealed just how broken our communication and respect for each other had become. "So, if I left, you'd be in trouble, right?" My anger boiled over. "If you wanted a younger woman, you should have married one before we got together. I asked you if you were fine with my age, and you said yes. That's why we're married. But trust me, I can manage just fine without you." Charles responded with a mocking laugh. "Fine, then let's get a divorce," he said, grabbing his beer and the takeout before storming off to his room. We had fought plenty of times before, but this argument felt different, like we had crossed a line. I was tired of his constant disrespect. I sat down with my takeout, trying to calm myself, hoping maybe he was just hungry and irritable. But as I ate, the weight of our conversation hung heavily on me, especially with my mom's death anniversary just around the corner. After some time, I called out to him from outside his door. "We need to leave by 7 a.m. tomorrow, so I'll wake you up around 6 o'clock. There was no response, though I was sure he was awake. I went to bed, feeling a mix of exhaustion and unease. The next morning, I woke up early to find that Charles was already gone. The bags I had packed for us were still in the room. He hadn't left for the gathering without me. So, where had he gone? I tried calling his phone, but there was no answer. He ignored my texts too. Left with no choice, I left him a voicemail and started getting ready on my own. As I waited for the train at the station, Charles finally picked up. "I have a meeting. Can't leave it to my juniors," he said curtly before hanging up. I stood there, staring at my phone, feeling a mix of anger and resignation. I stood there, stunned and bewildered, as the train arrived. With no time to dwell on it, I boarded, struggling with the luggage meant for both of us. When I finally reached my father's house, his anxious eyes met mine as he asked, "Where's Charles?" Seeing the lingering sadness in his eyes since my mother's passing, I didn't want to add to his worries. Forcing a smile, I took a deep breath and replied, "Sorry. He got called into an important meeting. He was supposed to come." Charles's recent promotion made for a convenient excuse. and I reassured my father that his absence was work-related and important. My father nodded understandingly. I know he's working hard. It's a shame not to see him, but your mother would have understood. Let him know he's always welcome here, he said softly. There was a hint of sadness in his words, but I kept my smile intact throughout the day, refusing to show how much it hurt. The day passed without a word from Charles, and as night settled in, I chose not to reach out either. I decided to stay the night at my father's house and return home the next day, as planned. Though it felt almost childish, the thought of making Charles his favorite meal, hamburgers, crossed my mind for when I got home. The following day, I left my father's house and returned home around noon. Before heading out to the grocery store, I wanted to drop off my bags. As I walked into the living room, I immediately noticed Charles's dirty laundry scattered across the floor, a sight I was all too familiar with. With a sigh, I thought, he still hasn't learned how to use the washing machine. I tossed his clothes in with mine, and after a brief moment, headed back to the living room. That's when something caught my eye. Sitting on the table, as if left deliberately in plain view, were divorce papers, already signed by Charles. My heart sank. Was this really how he wanted to communicate that he was serious about ending our marriage? Staring at the papers in disbelief, a storm of emotions surged through me. Grabbing my phone, I hesitated for a second before calling him, unsure if he'd even pick up during his lunch break. To my surprise, he answered almost immediately. "What's the meaning of these divorce papers?" I demanded, my voice a blend of confusion and anger. Charles responded with a cold, mocking laugh. "What's there to question? It's exactly what it looks like. I don't want an older wife who won't do her chores. That's why I want a divorce. If we split, I can find a younger wife. A wife's like a status symbol, right? I can't exactly boast about you." His words hit me like a punch, reducing our years together to nothing more than a transaction, turning what I had believed to be a partnership into something shallow and superficial. Charles continued, his tone indifferent. "It's tough when my team asks about you. It's awkward avoiding the topic." I was speechless. His blunt criticism was stunning, and I found myself unable to respond. "If you don't want a divorce, then start doing your chores properly," he continued, as if this was a reasonable request. "I'll be home as usual tonight, so don't forget to grab some beer. If you disagree, take the divorce papers to court. It's up to you." With that, he hung up, leaving me reeling, my mind spinning with shock and disbelief. Charles probably assumed I'd give in to his demands, thinking that I did the housework because I was afraid of losing him or worried about appearing incompetent. Perhaps he saw himself as the dominant figure in our marriage. Some might think being married to a younger man sounds exciting, but in reality, it was far from glamorous. I had often played up his youth, but if I was honest, Charles was painfully average in looks, personality, and income. There was nothing exceptional about him. Describing him as younger had merely been convenient. When we first got married, the 4-year age gap had seemed more noticeable, but now, in our 30s, it felt trivial. It was exhausting to constantly be labeled the older wife when we were essentially the same age. Fed up with his arrogance and the hollow foundation of our marriage, I grabbed my bag and headed straight to the family court. Submitting those divorce papers felt like lifting a weight off my chest. As I walked out of the courthouse, a sense of relief washed over me. I realized then that I didn't need Charles to feel complete. With the promise of newfound freedom, I felt lighter, as though I had finally stepped out from under a cloud that had long been looming over me. This was the end of our marriage, but the beginning of a life where I could truly live on my own terms. Seizing the opportunity, I decided to take a few days off from work. Fortunately, my boss understood and granted me a week's leave, as work had slowed down. Now that I was officially divorced, it was time to get my life in order. With only a few possessions, the cleaning and packing were straightforward. I stored the larger items in a storage unit, packed the essentials and clothes into my car, and on a whim, decided to visit a hot spring resort. During the off-season, I easily found a budget-friendly hotel and set off, thrilled to start this new chapter of my life. I was savoring the peaceful atmosphere of the hot springs and enjoying the relaxation of my hotel room when my phone rang abruptly. "Angela, didn't I ask you to get beer? Where are you?" It was Charles, sounding puzzled and slightly irritated. It was around the time he usually returned home from work. I couldn't help but chuckle as I answered, "I'm at a hot spring resort." "A hot spring resort? Why? What's going on?" Charles's voice carried a mix of confusion and agitation. "Didn't you say I should file for divorce if I disagreed with you?" I reminded him, picturing his stunned expression, which made me laugh even more. "Wait, did you actually file them?" His tone shifted from bewildered to frustrated. "Yes, I did. You suggested it, Charles. Have you forgotten what you said?" I replied, still amused by his reaction. Charles's voice, now tinged with anxiety, showed his disbelief. "Wait, are you joking? When you say hot spring resort, do you mean some nearby spa? If so, I'll get dinner. Come home soon." I couldn't help but laugh at his sudden shift to a seemingly considerate tone, as if he was trying to play the caring husband. It took me about an hour and a half to drive here. There's even an outdoor natural hot spring. It's incredibly relaxing. I hope it doesn't rain tomorrow. Since you're getting dinner, I've already packed my things, so you won't have to worry about me coming back. Take care of yourself. Charles pleaded for me to return, but I had no intention of going back. You're the one who initiated the divorce. Have you forgotten? It was clear you were using the threat of divorce to control me. I told him firmly. I can manage without you now that you've divorced your older wife. Go ahead and find a younger one if you can. Whether you succeed or not is no longer my concern, I said firmly. Charles fell silent, clearly taken aback by my determination. After a moment, he spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. "But you should consider moving out of that apartment." "Why should I?" I responded calmly, though I had already considered this myself. "Think about your income. You'll end up broke if you stay there. You can't clean, do laundry, or cook. You'll need housekeeping and dining out, which costs money. It would be a problem if most of your salary goes towards rent," he reasoned. I couldn't help but smile slightly. "You thought you were the provider, but my salary is nearly double yours. You never really provided for me. If anything, it was the other way around," I said, cutting to the core of the issue. "Also, you were overly confident because of one junior. But did you know I manage multiple juniors and even more beneath them? I usually keep work to myself because you get moody, but I outrank you in both position and salary. You'd think you would have noticed after living together." It seemed like Charles was just now realizing this, possibly because he had kept his ego intact by looking down on me. Now that his delusion was shattered, he must have felt defeated. I had struck a blow to his pride, a kind of retribution for all these years. The reason I had handled household chores without complaint, despite his domineering attitude, was partly because he was younger and I had given him some leeway, and partly because it was too much trouble to ask him for anything. It's not like I needed you to stay with me. I was just managing your needs along with my own. So when you said, "Do the chores, or we divorce," of course, I chose divorce. We're strangers now. Goodbye, I said firmly before ending the call. Feeling a sense of liberation, I enjoyed a delicious meal at the hotel afterward. Charles, evidently still clinging to the idea of reconciliation, attempted to reach out again, but I was already relishing the newfound freedom and independence in my life. When he called once more, I greeted him with a knowing smile. "Remember, I'm older than you. I'm sure you wouldn't want me back." It seemed that Charles's search for companionship with younger women had not been successful. Eventually, he realized his situation was not favorable and decided to move out of the apartment. To handle the division of assets, I hired a lawyer to ensure I received more than just an equitable split. I sought additional compensation to reflect the years I had managed most of the household chores. Charles, always looking to cut costs, opted against hiring legal representation, giving me a considerable advantage. With the help of my lawyer, we secured a settlement that was highly favorable to me. I was satisfied with the outcome and relieved to have resolved the matter. Meanwhile, Charles's troubles at work were only beginning. His junior team member had been openly critical of his leadership, undermining his authority by declaring he wasn't a proper boss. Charles discovered these complaints, leading to a heated argument, another clear sign of the importance of nurturing and supporting your team, something Charles had evidently neglected. In terms of my career, I had been offered a highly sought-after position at our company's overseas headquarters. Initially, I hesitated to accept due to the personal upheavals and out of consideration for Charles. However, with my personal situation evolving, I decided to embrace the opportunity wholeheartedly. I am now actively preparing for this exciting transition, though it has caused some concern for my father. We've adapted by practicing video calls to stay connected once I'm abroad. I feel content and excited about the future, ready to fully commit to this new chapter of my life. It's time to pursue the career I've always dreamed of, confident that I've made the right decisions for my future.